Hiccup reached over and squeezed one of her crossed arms. I am sorry too. She put her own hand on top of his. Then she pulled it off him, grabbing both his hands between them, with her usual manic grin. But we can still have a blast. And if it helps putting a little fire under Fish and Astrid, I am all for it. I don't think that would work. Fish legs may wake up and see the light, but there was no light for Astrid. Hiccup was not even an option as a romantic prospect for her. The idea was ridiculous. Ruff pulled at him so close, they were almost nose to nose. And if not, we are gonna have a fun night and make fun of everyone else. Deal. Hiccup grinned. The phone rang, and Hiccup made a discouraged noise. But before he could pick up the phone, Ruff had leaned over the counter and grabbed the old orange landline. She spoke quickly and unforgiving, before she slammed the handle back again, cutting off Miss Sanders mid-rant. She winked at Hiccup. As Hiccup went back into the garage to work, Rough Nut followed, settling down near him, throwing comments to him from time to time, handing over tools and making fun of him. What about Tough and Snot? Hiccup asked, once he was under the car again. Tough has plans to try to blow up the DJ pult and raid the teacher's lounge. Let him have his fun. Toothless protective genes had already flared up with the comment, but Rough Nut's reassurance seemed to have cooled him off for now. And Snot? Hiccup heard Rough Nut snort and cackle from above the car. Snot is gonna pester every girl he can think of until he has a date. And then he is gonna proclaim that he is too much to handle and go stag. Rough Nut shone a light from above, so Hiccup could locate if there were any holes in the floor of the car. Tough not gonna ask him, because he knows Snot is straight as a board, and he rather have him as a friend. He is ace anyway, and he likes what they have now. Hiccup briefly almost dropped his tool down on his face. He peered out from under the car. Should you even tell me this? He asked softly. The twins were not known for their subtlety, but spilling your brother's sexuality to a third party, may be some kind of breach of the twin code. Rough Nut looked up from playing with her braid. You're Hiccup. You're the glue that holds us together. He was gonna tell you at some point. This way I can soften the blow. She leaned over him. The ends of her long braids were formed into balls, and they were dangling very close to Hiccup's face. He pushed one of them, making them dance more. And you and Fish. I am patient. I can wait for Fish legs to get his head out of his ass. She moved back so Hiccup could move out from under the car. They moved around it to peer under the hood. And you and Astrid. Rough Nut shuffled her weight from foot to foot, but her tone was teasing. Hiccup cursed. How did we get to this? Now come on. Rough Nut followed him around as he peered in behind the passenger seat, and started digging around in between the cushions. The action kept him busy to think about what he was saying. Fine. I would like us to be more, but what we have right now is also nice. Just nice, Rough Nut complained disgustedly. If you are insinuating that I lay awake thinking about her. You would be right, he confessed. You gross. Too much information, my guy. Rough Nut made an unhappy sound, but she still smirked at him. Hiccup smiled and finally found what he was looking for. Then pulled out a half-empty tic-tac package, shaking it, making the mysterious rattle sound. Rough Nut burst out laughing. Chapter 21, Shenanigans. Summary. Let go to the party. Notes. Chapter warning, underage drinking. Same as last chapter. Totally normal for me, but not for everybody. See the end of the chapter for more notes. Chapter text. Hiccup was not stupid. He knew he and Rough Nut were friends, and there was no need to make a big deal out of it, but he kinda wanted to make a big deal out of it. Astrid was not into big dramatic gestures, and Hiccup would never attempt such a blowout with her, but Rough Nut was not Astrid. She may not say it, but Rough Nut was into the girly stuff, and looked forward to the dance. And she loved the drama. So Hiccup decided he was gonna be the perfect feast date, and set out to surprise her anyway. He showed up at school with a large bouquet of flowers, not roses, and presented them to her, loudly asking her to go with him to the fall fest. Rough Nut chittered happily as she accepted. The look on Snotlout's face, together with the rest of the whole was priceless. Fish legs on the other hand looked confused. Like he was trying to solve a puzzle, where the pieces would not fit. Tough Nut howled and Wolf whistled as Hiccup extended his arm to Rough Nut, and they walked arm in arm to the next class. They grinned and chuckled, talking loudly as they left, so they almost didn't hear someone punching a hole in their metal locker. But nothing really gets past dragon ears, and Toothless heard it, even if his human was too occupied to give it any mind. Tough and Rough were talking dress ideas over lunch, showing pictures to Hiccup on their phones, to get his opinion. Tough seemed to have forgotten his agenda against the secret government, in sight of his sister's potential happiness. Hiccup, for the fun of it, approved the most ridiculous-looking dress, filled with ruffles and large impractical bows, much to the delight and cackles of the two of them. Across from them, Fishlegs still looked contemplating, while Snot had accepted the situation, and even gave input to the discussion. Astrid was very quiet, and only squeaked when a can fizzled over in her hand, after she punctured it with her claws. Hiccup handed over his napkins. "Hey, you okay? Did training go bad this morning?" Astrid grabbed the napkins, and shook her head stiffly. Hiccup did not have time to ask further, as Rough Nut grabbed his arm, and showed him the next ridiculous-looking dress. "Hey!" Hiccup waved at Astrid at her locker, the rest of their pack following, but more caught up in their own conversation, and Fishlegs in his phone. "Go away." Astrid smacked her locker shut. "What? Why?" Hiccup jumped away surprised. Astrid only grunted and walked away. Hiccup scoffed and walked after her. He reached for her arm, and she snatched it back with a dragon snarl. Toothless' ears laid flat with the display, and his eyes narrowed. Hiccup snapped at Astrid. "Hey! Truce, remember. Don't ignore me. Tell me what's wrong." He pointed an accusing finger at her, and she pushed it away with a huff. "Nothing is wrong." Toothless disagreed, and Strongfly hummed agitated. "There is something wrong. I can tell something is wrong. Toothless can feel something is wrong." Astrid still tried to walk away from him. "Come on, Astrid, don't hide from me," he yelled after her. She stopped, only to turn on her heels and march right back up in his face. "You didn't wanna go to the fall fest?" She spat, the tip of her fingers elongated into a sharp point, aimed at his face. "I never said that." Hiccup bristled, and Toothless backed him up with a hoarse warning hiss, his nose scrunched up in annoyance. Astrid and Strongfly did not let Toothless' efforts scare them and hissed back. "You never wanted to go the other years. You've never been before." Hiccup threw his hands up in the air. "Well, maybe I have never been, because nobody wanted to go with me before. You know, being soulless. So maybe I just stayed away for everyone's sake." Toothless barked and Strongfly huffed. "Oh, but now with a dragon, you're suddenly Mr. Popular." Astrid sneered at him, spikes crowning at her head. "What? What are you even saying? You are not going either. What does that even mean?" He stammered, stupefied and confused. Toothless fummed. "Like sneaking away smooching with Rough in the garage." Astrid gestured towards their group of friends, who watched in silence, trying to hide how they obviously listened in. "What?" Astrid shook her head. "Tough Nut saw you two closing up, when he dropped her off at the garage." Tough Nut had the decency to look sheepish, as Hiccup shot him a glare, and his sister punched him hard on the shoulder. The tapping on Fishleg's phone silenced. "So?" Hiccup brushed it off and stared at Astrid. Astrid just let out an angry growl, the scales on her neck standing on end. Hiccup felt Toothless tense up in response, ready for any sudden movement. The dragon's hiss shivered through him like a wave. "Never mind." Astrid growled a tone too high to be normal. "Well, maybe I wanted to go, but can't." "Well, I want to go too." Hiccup reasoned, his own voice raising to Astrid's level. "It's not like anybody asked me before either. Why not just ask them yourself?" Astrid's cheek was bash red now, while Hiccup fought to keep his shift under control. "Maybe if you listened you may have noticed that quite a lot tried to ask you for the ball. Like I care about that stuff." Astrid huffed, and flipped her braid obnoxiously. "It sounds like you do." Hiccup crossed his arms, hiding his blackening fingernails. "But I don't. It's just a stupid party anyway." Astrid shrieked at him. Behind them, Hiccup felt his friends jump at Astrid, shouting. Right. Too good for a Horferson. The color drained from Astrid's face, and Hiccup knew he had hit a nerve. Her clenched fists shook against her sides. Shut up. You don't know anything. Toothless talons hurt, as they started to bore into Hiccup's arms, but he kept them crossed. Yeah, because you won't tell me. You and Stormfly have been all over me since I presented, but that doesn't mean that you get to decide over me. If I wanna go to the party, I can go to the party. I don't care that you are going to the party. Astrid insisted. Fine. Fine. Have fun at the mayor's ball, and give my regards to Thuggery. Hiccup said as a final comment, before he turned his back on her. Hiccup. Astrid shouted after him. Hiccup returned to his friends, and grabbed Rough Nut's hand. They walked away, leaving the others behind. Rough only briefly looked back towards Astrid. Then her face steeled, and she held on to Hiccup's hand as they went. They sat behind the cafeteria, where Hiccup got to let out a breath and sank down against the wall, having a minor panic attack. I yelled at Astrid. You did, and it was awesome. Rough Nut agreed and hunched down in front of him. Everybody heard. Hiccup quivered. Screw them. Rough Nut snorted. She hates me now. No, she doesn't. Rough grabbed his chin and forced him to look at her. No, she doesn't. Let her calm down. She'll come back, and you'll work it out. You think? Rough Nut smirked. Yeah. But right now, she is not gonna stop us for having a hell of a fun party. Hiccup nodded, and finally noticed Toothless soothing over his frayed nerves. He let Rough Nut pull him up and away, safely in the garage. The next couple of days, Astrid and Hiccup were overly civil with each other, barely talking. But Rough was filling the space, making sure Hiccup was smiling as they made preparation to go to the fest. Snotlout offered to drive, since he was not really doing anything that night anyway. Too much for the ladies to handle, he proclaimed, and Hiccup transferred a 20 to Rough Nut's card from his phone under the table. For lack of better options, Tough had dragged Snot and Hiccup out to get fancy wear. Apparently the suit Hiccup had gotten for his grandpa's old wrinkly funeral was not gonna cut it. So Hiccup got away with a decent off-black suit from 2 seasons ago, which meant it was half off, and that was good enough for Tough. He could use a tie from his father's collection, and one of his old dress shirts. Snot on the other hand went all in and found an all-red suit, with bedazzled black lapels, and silk boatie. When Hiccup was done laughing, he admitted his cousin looked good in it. When asked, Tough Nut already assured them he had his stuff in order. Which would have been fine, had he not chuckled ominously, while rubbing his hands. Hiccup decided he did not want to know for now. With a corsage in hand, he had all that he needed for the dance. On the night of the party, Stoic stuck his head into Hiccup's room to inform him he was leaving. Then he stopped, when he saw that the boys were up to. Hiccup was struggling with his father's old green tie, while Snotlout, already fully dressed, was flexing in front of Hiccup's full-length mirror. Ah, you're both going to the dance? Yeah, should we not? Hiccup looked at his father, with one half of the tie done. Well, I just assumed that maybe you would be hanging out with Gobber. His father scratched his beard, a bit embarrassed. Hiccup only shrugged and focused back on his crooked tie. No thanks. I have a date. Something flickered in Stoic's eyes, and he slowly entered the room. Really, who? He walked over as started to undo Hiccup's terrible knot, and retie it. Rough Nut. Hiccup said carefree. He could briefly see his father's disappointment, before he nodded and smiled. Thorsten. Great lass, that one. Yeah. She is great. With the job properly done, Stoic patted his son's shoulders. Oh, well, have fun. He patted Snotlout's shoulder on the way out as well. Just as he was out, Stoic poked his hand in once more. But not too much fun. Hiccup rolled his eyes. We'll be fine, Dad. No drunk driving or flying. Okay. Stoic went away only to appear again. But it's a school party, Dad. Hiccup complained. Don't you remember when you were young and went to parties? That is why I am worried. Relax, Stoic. Snotlout flipped his keys up in the air, before catching them again. I will get the lovebirds home in one piece, and back before midnight. He winked at Stoic. Stoic did not look impressed, but he still seemed grateful. With a final stern nod he left them alone. You really gonna have us home before midnight? Hiccup asked his cousin skeptically. Toothless chuckled in his mind. No way. It's the fall feast, we gotta go to the beach and hero moon. He finger-gunned himself in the mirror. Despite the obnoxious display, Hiccup suddenly felt like he could admit that he was related to Snotlout. Come on. Snoutlout howled. Let's go get your princess. Hiccup cackled and followed him out of the house. They drove up the Thorstons' driveway, and Hiccup walked up to the door and rang the doorbell. Ruffnut threw the door open with the largest smile Hiccup had ever seen. She looked gorgeous, except for one thing. She wore a light face of makeup, with glittery eyeshadow, and shimmer on her lips. Her long hair was gathered in intricate braids on top of her head, with 2 locks framing her face. She wore a pearl necklace and pearl studs in her ears. Her dress was tight-fitted and hot pink mermaid style, with white long elbow-length gloves. But what really caught Hiccup's eyes were the giant pink bow attached to the back, making her fill up the whole entryway. Hi. He stammered. Hi. Ruffnut hyped. Isn't it gorgeous? Look at this. She turned around so Hiccup could see the bow in all its glory. Is it not the most ridiculous thing you have ever seen? I can knock so many people over with this. It's gonna be a mess. She cheered. Whoa. You still look nice though. Hiccup added, despite Toothless' confused tremor in his mind. Thank you. Ruffnut said, reaching out her hand expectantly. Hiccup dug up the corsage from his pocket. Sorry, it doesn't match your dress. The neon blue flower crashed horridly with the luxurious bright pink. It's perfect. Ruffnut ticked as Hiccup slipped it on her wrist. She flicked her wrist to really take in the effect. So ready? Hiccup asked carefully. Almost. She sang. They turned to look at Mr. and Mrs. Thorston, who stood near with their phone camera open, and an honest-to-God's large Nikon. Tuff stood next to them wearing a black suit, with the bow tie undone, and a large hot pink flower in his breast pocket, still wearing his green beanie. Hiccup chuckled and let himself be dragged inside to pose for the photos with the twins. Snotlout, who came to check what took so long, also got dragged into the mix, and they had fun making silly faces, and ridiculous poses. Hiccup's favorite one was the one where Ruffnut had lifted him over her head, like a war trophy, while Snot and Tuff played air guitar next to it. Just before they all pulled into the car, Hiccup pulled Ruffnut to the side, and squeezed their faces together to take an awkward selfie on Hiccup's phone. Hiccup made the peace sign, while Ruffnut pulled out her tongue at the camera. Then they were off. Way had just parked, when Tuffnut sprinted off, leaving his jacket in the car, screaming his head off about grand schemes. They waved him off and wished him luck. After standing in line, freezing their ass off, they were finally let into the gym. Thank gods for dragon breath to warm up freezing hands and one's core. Ruffnut giggled when Hiccup offered to breathe on her hands, since all she could do was make sparks, and spew water. She still let him, and they spent the wait standing awkwardly with their hands between them, with Hiccup blowing on them from time to time, while Snotlout complained behind them in line. Hiccup still held her hand when they entered the decorated hall and gym. Large goblins depicting Vikings slaying dragons and other beasts, and some where they rode them, hung from the walls. More depictions of epic battles and more violence, but also the gods. Wooden shields had been painted with swords, helmets and signets hung around, with the standard balloons and cut-out cardboard stars, complete with a balloon arch when you entered the gym. Also pumpkins. A lot of them all around. To the side there was a selfie booth, with an array of shields, fake beards, rubber swords and helmets. An array of small round tables was scattered around the room, except in front of the scene where a DJ was warming up in front of the dance floor. A long table at the end was geared up with snacks and food, with the infamous punch bowl at the end. When Hiccup peeked over there, he saw a hand that looked suspicious, a lot like Tuffnut's, pour something into the concoction. Teachers and suspicious overprotective parents that had volunteered, milled around the happy loud teenagers. Rough Nut squealed happily and pulled Hiccup inside, as the DJ started up a more funky dance song. She used her elbows and her extremely large bow to mash their way to a table, and then in line for food. She took up the space for 2 seats, when they sat down with filled plates. It was a fun time. Hiccup was pulled out to the dance floor and twirled awkwardly a happy Rough Nut around. Even if Hiccup did not have a rhythm bone in his body, he still tried to follow the more complicated moves Rough Nut threw into the mix. They took turns trying to make the other laugh by pulling out the most obscene and old-school dance moves, moonwalking, twerking to disco. Snotlout also joined and they switched dancing with her, as she accidentally bumped into other groups and pairs dancing, making her more outgoing moves. Tough Nut showed up from time to time, dancing and laughing with them, his sleeves rolled up around his elbow, and booty missing. Hiccup had just pulled off a semi-successful dip with a cackling Rough Nut, that left them both laughing, but mostly because Tough Nut and Snotlout had done the same next to them with far more success, when Hiccup saw it. Shuffling his feet near the door, stood Fish Legs. He looked around clearly uncomfortable and stressed as he pulled at his collar. He was dressed in a brown suit, just a size too small that had been hastily thrown over his Ivan the Barbarian shirt, like he had left in a hurry. Ignoring Tough Nut's and Snotlout's flawless fake tango, he drew Rough Nut in close, so her ear was right next to his mouth. With one hand on her hip, and the other one in her hand, he turned them around, so she could not see the door. "Well, have you seen what the Gronkle dragged in?" He twirled her so he was now with his back to the entry, and felt Rough Nut gasp. The hand on his arms tightened in the fabric of his jacket, but else Rough Nut remained silent. Still Hiccup could feel her sudden agitation and giddiness. Small scales appeared on the hand he was holding, and her eyes flashed briefly. He grinned as they swayed to the music. "So?" he whispered. "You're gonna do something about it?" "In a minute." Rough Nut whispered back, leaning her face in his chest, as she tried to hide her blush. The feat was quite impressive as Rough Nut towered over him in her high-heel sandals. Hiccup spun her out, Toothless cooing in comfort, her own dragons humming in tandem. When she returned to his embrace, he grinned go get him. He hip-checked her, and made her stumble off the dance floor. She turned to him with a betrayed indignant look, but he only mouthed not sorry. And grabbed Tough Nut, who promptly dipped him, to make a point about proper dance technique to Snotlout. Hiccup pulled them both away behind a large flower pumpkin decoration thing, so they could spy and rough and fish much to Tough Nut's delight. They tried listening in, even with dragon ears, but the loud music and the noise from the room confused Toothless scenes, and it was impossible to hear without transforming his ears completely. Instead they watched with glee, as Fish Legs stumbled through a conversation, with a cross Rough Nut. In the end Rough still dragged a red-flushed Fish Legs to the dance floor where they twirled around, until they were both laughing. One slow awkward dance later, Tough Nut dragged the rest of them over to join them. Hiccup did an awkward Macarena with Fish as Rough and Tough did the robot. They took photos at the selfie machine wearing ridiculous beards and made fun of who could make the best face. At 21:12 Astrid and Thiggery had still not shown up. Hiccup sighed and let his breath turn into mist in the cool night air outside the gym. The side doors had been thrown open, to let air into the room, that had been heated to by the dancing bodies, and adolescent dragons blowing fire into the air. Toothless hummed in his head, fogging up Hiccup's mind, but that could have been the spiked punch. Hiccup leaned his head back, drawing in the cold air. They properly won't come. They were probably still stuck at the mayor's party, and Hiccup felt kinda foolish thinking that they still would have shown up. Even more foolish to dream Astrid would ditch Thuggery and save him a dance. Even after their fight. "Ready to go?" Snotlout said, joining him. Behind them Tough Nut, Rough and Fish Legs were waiting expectantly. Rough Nut was wearing Fish Legs' oversized jacket, drawing in the amount of fabric, but she looked happily flushed, with Fish Legs' arm around her shoulders. Tough Nut was sipping on a cup of punch, his completion flushed with the drink, while Snotlout held a water bottle, still respectable sober to drive them to the beach. Inside the gym the atmosphere had turned from awkward sober silence to more chaotic happy loos, as people and dragons got more inhibited with the drinks. With a sigh Hiccup pushed himself off the fence. So what if Astrid did not join them? It had still been fun. Hanging with his friends, dancing with Rough. Yeah, a pretty good party. And the night was not over yet. Just one more thing to do. Yeah. Let's go. They raced to the car, clearly seeing the problem. There was no way all of them could fit, with Rough Nut's giant bow. Rough Nut just snorted, and with a flourish, opened a clasp on the side of her hip, and undid her skirt and bow with a twirl, leaving her in a sophisticated hot pink pantsuit. Well, ain't you full of surprises? Hiccup grinned and jumped into the front seat. Of course. Rough smirked and stuffed the bow and skirt in the trunk. Notes. This is highly based on my own experience with Party's Trough Gymnasium. We would stand in the cold, waiting to get in, and freeze out ass off, because you were wearing high heels and a short dress. We did not have prom, but we did have a gala, where the year you were in determined the length of your dress. We had a courtyard where you could get air, but it was mostly where all the smokers could smoke, so not as much clean air. Chapter 22, What We Hide in the Dark. Summary. Everybody has their own secrets. Notes. Chapter warning. Underage drinking, normal drinking. Violence, Hiccup will punch somebody. See the end of the chapter for more notes. Chapter text. The beachfront was already filled up with people. Despite families with smaller children had left already, many more still milled around the pop-up stalls, and around the fire pits set up to offer warmth on the cold evening. Music blasted out the speakers, mixing with the excited chatter and dragon cries from the crowd. Snotlout parked, and they all jumped out to join the masses. They walked along the stalls and bought warm mead to heat them up, together with candied apples, meat on skewers and crepes with chocolate and banana filling. While Hiccup munched on his crepe, Snotlout threw ring toss in a stall, trying to win a stuffed nadder to Rough Nut. Rough Nut cheered him on, while Fishlegs stood smiling next to them. Tough Nut interfered and made Snotlout miss his last shot comically. Toothless hissed briefly to let Hook Fang come down from his sudden anger, and then they walked down to the end of the stall to the high striker. Snotlout boasted and said he could get the highest score, as he clearly was the most superior dragon. That sent Hiccup's friends into a frenzy, their dragons hissing and complaining, and they all lined up to beat him. Even Toothless hummed low in Hiccup's chest, ready to prove himself, against Snotlout's boosted ego. Fishlegs went first, unimpressed with Snotlout boasting. His hands and arms grew gnarly and bumpy brown as he lifted the hammer over his head. It came down with an impressive thunk, and the bolt nearly hit the bell. Hiccup mouth opened in woe as Fishlegs shook off the throw. Tough Nut lined up next, but his sister demanded her turn, and they ended up fighting in the spot over the hammer. Hiccup hid his grin behind his hand, as the twins lifted the hammer over their heads, and in a common effort, hammered it down on the spot. Shades of green, yellow and red blossomed over the exposed skin of Tough Nut's arms. Rough Nut was covered in Fishlegs' jacket, but Hiccup felt the dragon spark in her eyes, as the hammer came down. The blot flew up and only passed Fishlegs' mark with the tiniest bit, too much frustration for the twins. Fishlegs cheered and Hiccup clapped at their effort. Snotlout made a big show out of postering when it was his turn, showing off his flexing muscles. Hiccup rolled his eyes, and told him to get on with it. Tough Nut chuckled and leaned on Hiccup, whopping his fist in the air. Snotlout scowled at them for ruining his progress and started over too much more protest. When his hammer finally came down, it was sent straight to the bell, making it ring out into the air. The twins groaned, complaining about how Snotlout must be cheating, while Fishlegs cheered and gave him a high five. Snotlout kissed both his arms, flexing them in a particular obnoxious manner. "And that's how you do it, when you are the best," he sang, making his pharynx groan. "Can you and your precious terror beat that?" Snotlout challenged. Hiccup knew it was more for show than a real insult, but Toothless still hissed. Hiccup shushed him. "I think I am good. I can't go after such an impressive display of strength." Toothless growled unhappy, but Snotlout smiled and went straight into another postering session. Hiccup could only grin. He was still trying to stay low, and was not interested in the display, despite how good it would feel to rub into his cousin's face. He was supposed to be a terrible terror, and though sneaky and powerful, they were not that powerful. Toothless, on the other hand, it was hard to tell. Night Fury was more on speed and flight, than raw strength. Hiccup could not see the need, but gladly surrendered his cousin to make a fool of himself again. Behind them the bell rang out again, cutting off Snotlout's bolstering and the twins' hackling. This time the bell was struck with so much force, it made a visible dent and the sound drilled into Hiccup's sensitive dragon hearing. They all turned to see a stunning blonde couple, where the woman had just obliterated Snotlout's score. Hiccup felt his face heat up. Astrid. She looked beautiful in a blue dress with a fitted bodice, and a flaring skirt. Her hair had been done up, but now had slipped out of the fastenings, and her bangs kept getting in her eyes, so she kept trying to pull it away. She had swapped her high heels for a pair of worn-out trotted Converse, but they lay discarded next to her small clutch. Hiccup's eyes wandered to the young man behind her, who smiled warmly at their group. He was equally as handsome in his white suit, with tie and breast pocket in the same blue color as Astrid's dress. His golden hair was windswept and charming, matching his sparkling blue eyes. He was taller than all of them, very muscular despite being the same age as all of them. Astrid. You came. Rough Nut squealed and threw her arms around Astrid in a hug. The mead and the punch had made Rough tipsy with the rest of them, and that made her overly affectionate. Astrid looked puzzled for a second before hugging her back, sending knowing looks over her shoulder to the rest of them. Thuggery went around them and extended his hand to Hiccup. Hi. You must be Astrid's friends. I have heard so much about you. His smile was bright and honest, making it very hard for Hiccup to begrudge him for simply being there. Hiccup. And you must be Thuggery. Yes. Do you remember me? We met a couple years ago at one of my dad's parties. Back before he was elected. Yeah, I remember you. You were allergic to shellfish and threw up over Annika Parkinson's dress. Hiccup said smugly. Damn, I thought I would live that down. Not on my watch. Said Hiccup, which made Thuggery laugh. You're still a lot of fun. I was wondering why you were not coming around anymore. You always made it more fun. I presented late, and your parents found out my dad did not have much sway in the police force, before he was promoted. Damn, I hate that. He is such a pretentious prick sometimes, my dad. Thuggery ran a hand through his hair, but his tone and smile was genuine. You said it, not me. Hiccup shrugged. True, but the worst he can do is ground me. Late, you said. Thuggery took a step closer, looking him up and down, much to Toothless' annoyance. Yeah. Terrible terror. He ignored Toothless' complaining noise. Who would have thought? Whoa, really? To Hiccup's surprise, Thuggery's face lit up with interest. Yeah. Hiccup said wearily. That is really cool. You think? Yeah. They are really interesting dragons. How has it been going after you presented? This whole talk made Hiccup sort of uneasy, and Toothless slightly agitated. They were not used to people actually taking an interest in them. Was this normal, or was Thuggery just playing nice to impress Astrid, by being nice to her friends? Fine, I guess. Hiccup tried to look at his friends, but none of them seemed to notice his struggles. No hiding around. The odd question made Hiccup stare at Thuggery. There was something truly dragon in the way he smiled. Why would I? Thuggery quickly brushed the question off with a charming laugh and more human smile. No, I mean, your dragon is not as favored as others. Hiccup soured by the slight jab. No, not gonna hide who I am. He crossed his arms defiantly, and felt Toothless tense. Whoa. That's really cool. I wish I had your kind of courage. Courage. The honestly in Thuggery comment threw Hiccup off. But then Tough grabbed Thuggery's arm and pulled him over to another stall and left Hiccup alone. Hiccup felt it shift under his skin. The slight tug from Thuggery. But as soon as Thuggery was out of his vicinity, he lost it again. Still he felt Toothless rise to attention by the brief interaction. Beside him Snotlout stiffened. Please don't. You have that stupid look on your face. Just for one evening. Don't. I don't want to fish anyone out of the ocean. Hiccup shook his head, trying to clear the odd feeling. I don't know what you are talking about. He denied. You're doing the thing again, the dragon thing. Like with Ruff and with Hook Fang. Stop it. Let it be. Let them figure their own shit out. Thuggery chose that moment to put his arm around Astrid, and the sudden urge to help him and his dragon disappeared from Hiccup's mind. Even if Hiccup's mood was sadly thrown off by the appearance of Astrid and Thuggery, Hiccup was still determined to enjoy his night with his friends. They continued to eat their way through the stalls before ending in front of the large bonfire. And Hiccup even got to keep up tradition and rate the drunks that tumbled around, having a mighty good time. Including several kids from his school. One drunk teen had brought a speaker that blasted music out, making the scene around into an impromptu dance floor. Fish Legs fooled around with Ruff trying to make the most ridiculous dance moves, while much to Hiccup's dismay Thuggery was twirling Astrid around in a respectful manner. Snotlout smacked him on the arm and dragged him over to get some warm mead to heat them up. Ruffnut later dragged them into her dance circle, and Hiccup did not get away before he was breathless of laughter and dancing. He plopped down on the cold sand a spot away from the party. He sat feeling the sand move under his hands, his lungs heaving in the cool air, his ears prickling as they listened to the sound of his pack's cheers. Feeling Toothless stretching in his mind, while watching his surroundings. He took another sip of his mead. He heard the figure come near him, but he intentionally ignored it. Even as they sat down next to him in the sand. They sat in silence for a moment, just listening to the nearby music and sound of the happy crowd. To Hiccup's surprise, Astrid spoke first. "I'm sorry. I did not know you wanted to go to the stupid dance." Hiccup turned to her in surprise. It was very uncharacteristic of Astrid to apologize for, well, anything. "If I had known, then maybe." Astrid hesitated. "Then maybe I would have gone with you." Hiccup blinked a moment, completely stunned. Toothless was shifting, but staying silent. "I wanted to ask you, tried to actually, but then you told me you were going with Thuggery." He confessed, looking down into his drink. "Kinda threw me off." "Right." Astrid's eyes were focused on the waves, still not quite looking at him. "Sorry for yelling at you," Hiccup said, feeling Astrid shift next to him. She dug the tips of her shoes down in the sand. "It's all right," she said softly. "I just wanted you to know, that if I could have done it differently, I would have liked to go with you." She honed in on herself, her face on top of her folded arms, cradling her knees. "I would have liked that," he admitted softly. "Why? Could you not? Go with me, I mean." She finally looked at him. "Astrid, I have known you forever. You are the strongest person I know. How hard would it be to say no to your parents?" Astrid scoffed. "That's rich coming from you and your father." Now it was Hiccup's turn to scoff. "We are working on that. But I know that you are nowhere near saying no to your parents, then I am telling my dad about my dragon." Astrid shook her head. "You don't get it. I'm maybe the only one who does." Hiccup tried to sound mature and inviting, even if his heart was beating 50 miles an hour trying to beat out his chest, from just sitting near her. It's not easy being the disappointment of Stoic the Vast. A hand found his. "But you're not. You're not a disappointment. Not to me." "Thanks Astrid." He turned his own hand, to hold on to hers. "You should take your own advice. You're not a disappointment either. I wish your parents could see that." After a moment Astrid pulled her hand back, clearing her throat and looking towards the water again. She tried pushing her bangs away from her face again, but the wind was playing with it making the task impossible. "Thuggery seems nice," Hiccup added after another silent awkward moment. He could feel Toothless gloat over his discomfort. Hiccup swirled around the remaining content of his cup. "Yeah, he is fine." She suddenly sat straighter and glared at him. "You know we're friends, right?" "Yeah, I figured." Hiccup ruffled his own hair, trying to tame it in the wind. "Just friends," Astrid said slowly, trying to pronunciate her words carefully. "Oh," Hiccup stammered, finally getting Astrid point, and getting hot all over at the same time. "He has a girlfriend, you know," she added. "No, I did not know." Hiccup struggled trying to figure out how to deal with that information on top of his fairing emotions. "Yeah. I'm just sticking it out with him, until he tells his parents," Astrid said, drawing in the sand with her finger. He agreed to help me out and go to the stupid dinner, and not be a dick about it. A spiked nada formed under her fingers' movement. A secret girlfriend, huh? Knew you liked a bad boy. He pushed her gently with his shoulder. Astrid flicked sand at him, making chuckle. Stop it. Astrid, are we friends? He looked up to the sky, looking at the stars over his head. Because a lot of times it feels like we aren't. He scratched his cheek uncomfortably. He was not sure where his sudden burst of courage had come from. We're fighting a lot, and sometimes you ignore me. I don't know. Astrid was silent next to him for a long time, before she spoke, her voice low and barely audible with all the background noise from the party. I want to be friends. Hiccup felt his fingers dig into the sand, and form into fist. But you didn't before. No, until after Toothless. Hiccup sighed and took another draw of his mead, emptying the cup. Sometimes it makes me wonder, if you only talk to me because Stormfly is making you. No. What are you talking about? Astrid sounded mad, but Hiccup was too tired to care right now. About you. About us. About him. I know your dragons are all connected to Toothless somehow, even though I am not sure why. But the moment he came along, I became visible again. Especially to you. To Stormfly. He nodded at her. She is blocking me in some way. Astrid admitted. About Toothless. All she says is that he is pack, and she will protect the pack. But I think there is more to it that she is not telling me. So she is the reason you are talking to me again. Because she owes Toothless or something. It kinda hurt to admit it. Next to him, Astrid was shaking her head, then she stopped confused. I don't know. I hoped that somehow I could have managed the courage to talk to you, but I could not. She gave me the push. I want to be friends. Always wanted to. Her shoes dug deeper into the ground. But being a Horferson was somehow more important. I am sorry for that. Maybe not all of it, but I am sorry that I had to cut you off like that. It seemed like the only way at that time. And now? What happens next time your parents think that being friends with a terrible terror is beneath a Horferson? Hiccup deadpanned, and Astrid hissed at him, dragon in his throat. But you're not a terror. That doesn't matter. If you think I'm gonna bust Toothless out just to please your parents, you got it wrong. I won't. I have not even shown my own parents. So what makes you think I want to share him, for you? Astrid was silent for a moment, biting her lip. Her face was flushed, even as she tried to control her anger. Hiccup was also angry, but he was mostly tired. I will fight. I am not giving up this time. I promise. Astrid's serious face was very close to his. I want to believe it. Hiccup mumbled. Then let me prove it. Astrid reached out for his arm, but Hiccup pushed it away. No, don't. I don't want some sign of loyalty. I just want my friend back. He heaved. I just want my Astrid back. Her eyes grew round and big, and so impossible blue. Maybe the buzz was settling in, because Hiccup leaned in closer so their noses were almost touching. If you ever get tired of being a Horferson, you could always become a haddock. He smirked. What? Astrid stuttered. I am sure I can find a way to make that happen. He chuckled and leaned back. Astrid flushed, but Hiccup didn't notice to caught up in his drink. His head was fussy, and the buzz from the alcohol was nice. Toothless' usual presence dimmed a little around the edges with the sensation, but he was always there. Always watching over him and keeping him safe. So, we're good. Still. Friends. The words were almost hesitant. She still looked immensely pretty, with the wind in her hair, stars in her eyes and dragon in her heart. Hiccup breathed a deep sigh, trying to get a handle of his conflicting emotions. Happiness over being friends with Astrid again, and the disappointment of being just friends with Astrid again. Yeah, we are still friends. He reached over to hug her sideways, and instead she let her head rest on his shoulder, with his arms around her. Hiccup sat still for a moment just listening to her breathing, feeling the weight on his shoulder, rubbing the fabric of her jacket under his fingertips. Feeling the subtle whiff from Stormfly. Astrid sat up abruptly as Tough Nut ran over to them, shouting about them being unsocial. Hiccup knew there was no way of deteriorating him, so he got up, and brushed the sand from his pants. He extended a helping hand to Astrid, which she took. They hurried up and quickly joined their friends and Thuggery. Now with Thuggery so close, Toothless was more sensitive to his agitated dragon, and in Hiccup's inhabited state, he was not doing a good job at controlling him. Hiccup could feel his skin crawl with Toothless' sudden restlessness. Even if Thuggery had a secret girlfriend, and he was not dating Astrid, Hiccup's personal feelings still impacted his judgment. It was hard to just let go of his jealousy right there and now. He could only hope it would mellow out. Still, as Thuggery laughed and twirled Astrid around in a mock greeting, the dreaded nauseous feeling still clung to his skin. That combined with Toothless' constant shifting and agitation made him want to put some distance between himself and them. At least while he got his head together. When Toothless became like this, he had a hard time thinking properly. Of course the alcohol that he had previously enjoyed mollifying the world around him, was now working against him. Great. He broke out of the circle, and said something about getting them new drinks. He ducked out around a couple of men with their arms around each other, singing their hearts out, voices colored by mead. He had barely gotten a few meters away before Thuggery caught up with him and offered to help. Of course. Because he was a nice guy. Toothless growled in Hiccup's mind, his own shift trying to break free. He had to take a moment of just breathing to get Toothless to get go of him. Thuggery noticed, with his arms full of mead. You alright? Give me a minute. Losing control. No, just, Hiccup breathed heavily, trying to drown out Toothless growls coming through his voice. Lucky Thuggery seems unaffected by Hiccup's weird behavior. Then maybe take it easy with the mead, right? He gave Hiccup a friendly pat on the shoulder. Don't want a primal dragon running around, he joked. Hiccup looked him up and down, and noticed that there was another cup missing, beside the one for Snotlout, who was driving. Thuggery was not drinking either. Like yours. Hiccup could not say what was coming over him. Stupid dragon with stupid dragon instincts. Toothless layered in the edge of his mind. Thuggery's smile faltered for only a minute. Then the smile was back. He was much taller than Hiccup, but Hiccup was not intimidated. Not with Toothless at having his back. Let's just go back to the others. Thuggery suggested. No, I think we should talk. Toothless hummed louder in his head. By now the others had noticed the drinks, and were coming over to help carry, only to stumble at Hiccup's frosty tone. His pack's dragon was very much in tune with Toothless, and the shift in temperament set them off. Hey man. It's okay. Nothing to worry about. Thuggery's smile was strained as he distributed the cups. Hiccup was not impressed. Neither was Toothless. What's wrong with your dragon? He asked ice cold. Toothless hissed. Hiccup. Astrid protested open-mouthed. Not again. Snotlout huffed, and Toughnut took a deliberate step in front of his sister. Are you embarrassed over it? Hiccup continued. He felt Toothless' claws itching, the urge to shift and make the other dragon comply. Thuggery remained silent. Answer me. Toothless demanded. His friends remained awkwardly quiet, shuffling their feet and looking the other way. Fishlegs took one of the mead cups and chucked its contents. Roughnut shuffled her feet beside him, lifting her own cup to her lips. Her cheeks had a rosy hue, but her eyes were still and focused. Better tell him. Roughnut said quietly. It will be worse if you don't. He is not gonna stop. Thuggery turned to Astrid for assistance, but Hiccup ignored her plea for letting it go. Instead he walked up to Thuggery and took his face between his hands, making everyone uncomfortable. More importantly, he placed his hands behind Thuggery's ears, fingers tracing around to find the right spot, his mother's paper clear in his mind. Toothless and the buzz from the mead seemed to have washed away his personal boundaries. Thuggery, not knowing to respond, gasped as Hiccup found the 2 points and pushed. A shiver ran over Thuggery's body, but nothing else happened. Huh. You not another, Hiccup saying matter-of-factly, stepping back. Toothless' sigh seemed to plummet, and instead was replaced with interesting confusion. All the aggression gone like dug from the sun. Hiccup's mind was suddenly quiet and mellow once more. How could you tell? Thuggery said, his voice small and slightly panicked. Beside them Astrid gasped. That would have released an adder, but you're not one. You're something else. Hiccup reached out again, but Thuggery took a step back, grabbing at his arms. Toothless barked a warning, but the other boy deflected it. His eyes briefly flashing, as response to Toothless' taunt. Hey now. He sputtered, trying to deflect Hiccup's hands. He looked to the others for help, but they just shook their heads, embarrassed by Hiccup's display. After some scuffling, Thuggery got a hold of Hiccup's hands. Stop it! He hissed, finally showing some dragon. Toothless purred. Thuggery may not be on board, but his dragon was. It was silently calling out to Toothless. If I tell you, will you stop? And not tell anyone? Sure. Hiccup said undeterred. Thuggery rolled his eyes and they turned yellow, while a length of scales appeared on his neck and chin. They were grey in the low light, but almost silver when the light caught them. Beside him, Hiccup felt Hook Fang shift, aware of a threat in his area. Another nightmare. Monstrous nightmare. Hiccup concluded. Thuggery's shift disappeared as fast as it had been there. And why are you embarrassed about that? He complained. Astrid let out a string of curses and annoyed sounds. Toothless seemed pleased, but something had shifted in the dragon. He was happy to help, but another large A-grade dragon in his territory could become a threat, if not treated carefully. Hiccup had no use for dragon politics, and just sulked. He could not understand the problem. He had been soulless. Not that it was something to complain about. Why was Thuggery complaining about being one of the strongest and most sought-after dragon spices? It was simply not fair. Because it sucks to be a nightmare, when you are expected to be an adder. Thuggery snarled, his nightmare temper showing. That was why he had been so careful with his drink. The charming smile and carefree eyes. He was trying not to let his dragon slip. You should tell them. Hiccup just said. About both. Astrid shifted behind them, and Thuggery's eyes widened slightly. If you don't, then he's gonna take matters into his own claws. Toothless only confirmed Hiccup's assessment. I'll think about it. Thuggery said through gritted teeth. Hiccup shrugged, then his hand surged forward, hitting Thuggery in the chest. His friends protested around him as Thuggery dug over. Hiccup cursed and shook his hand in pain, two of his fingers outstretched. But he had hit the points. Thuggery's body shivered once more, this time with scales, and a large silver tail landed behind him, while spikes grew over his face. When he stood up, hands still on his knees, smoke was coming out of his nostrils. Better. Hiccup said, still contemplating his aching hand. Much, Thuggery hissed. Don't do it again. Only if you ask. Tough Nut jeered. Damn you crazy. They walked away, and Hiccup just managed to hear Thuggery whisper to Astrid. You did not say he was smart too. Astrid made a strangled noise, but Hiccup didn't hear her come back as Tough Nut dragged him along with the rest of them. Astrid joined them shortly but without Thuggery. Said he was done for tonight. Well, his loss. Tough spat, mouthful of food and mead. They walked down the beach, where the lights from the walkway got further and further away, leaving them in almost darkness. But that was no issue to a bunch of dragons with night vision. Further down, closer to the lights, people have already shed their shoes to jump the waves. The sound of shrieks and hissing when the cold water hit skin carried all the way to Hiccup and his friends. Tough Nut was already shuffling out his shoes and running towards the water, hands in the air, screaming his lungs out. Hiccup figured it was a way to overcome his fear of the water and get it over with. Rough Nut was pulled by Fish Legs, who stopped to pull up his pants legs. Snotlout pushed him all in when he took too long, then cannonballed himself. Hiccup placed his keys, phone and wallet in the sand, so he didn't drop it in the ocean. He dipped his own feet in the water, feeling the chill from the cold sand and the icy touch of the waves. Astrid stood beside him, arms around herself, shivering as she dipped her toes. In the water Rough and Tough were up to their knees, throwing water at the others, while Fish Legs chased them around. I wanna shift, Hiccup said, as Toothless' intentions become overwhelming. The night events had finally dried his resolve. Toothless ached and stretched, and with Hiccup's mind fussy, it would only be a matter of time before he would give in. "Ah, no," Astrid said with authority. "What if anybody sees you?" Hiccup chuckled and let their wings expand. "Do you?" He wandered out, his feet already shifting. Astrid rolled her eyes. She had a hard time focusing on him, as he almost disappeared against the dark ocean and the black sky. Night Fury. Right, she scuffled and followed him out to the others. Seeing Hiccup's shifted state, the others followed suit and shifted as well. Roaring and hissing in glee, letting their dragons loose. Even Astrid after some hesitation. Hiccup was drunk on the happy feeling with the shift and the mead. He stomped his foot and made splashes on the others. Hiccup hip-checked Rough Nut and she stumbled into her brother. They all froze when they started shouting. Astrid gripped Hiccup's arm, and Hiccup let her step in front of him. But he also wrapped an arm around her middle, ready to hold her back. The shouting quickly turned to laughter as they twins gaped at each other. They were fused together at the hip, scales covering their connected skin. Rough Nut, who had let the water dragon lead, trilled. Scaldy pulled back and Buff's impression became more firm. Scales growed from their body. Belch was echoing on Tough Nut, and the twins' middle legs connected together, merging into one, before splitting into a split dark tail. While the twins howled and cackled, their friends could only stare. "It don't hurt at all," Rough Nut shouted. "This is so awesome." Tough Nut purred. Their impressions changed, turning more dragons. Hiccup felt Astrid and Stormfly relax under his arm, and went in to hug her, resting his face on her shoulder. It's a little awkward as she was still taller than him, even though they both had dragon feet. But they swayed slightly with the movement of the water. The twins jumped all about swinging their new common tail, with Fish and Snotlout chasing after them. Makes sense that they need each other to shift. Hiccup mumbled into Astrid's hair. They share a dragon after all. Astrid only hummed. Her transformed hands were resting on Hiccup's arms as they swayed. Hiccup breathed in her scent. Toothless was much more territorial than Hiccup, but this was truly his own. He knew the attraction he felt towards Astrid. Releasing in the dull ache he remembered. It would be so easy to bury his nose in her neck, and kiss the soft skin. They were knocked over by the twins, tumbling them down in their eagerness. Astrid managed to steady herself, but Hiccup landed butt down in the ocean, soaking his suit. The twins tripped over him and separated into two separate blobs in the ocean. Hiccup hissed and used his wings to drench them. They growled and the game was on. Toothless used his strong wings and they took off, basking the strong appendices trying to get some warmth out through the limbs, after the cold dip in the ocean. Only Astrid and Stormfly could follow, so Astrid leaped at him, using her own arms for flight. They taunted the others from above, before they all, shaking and shivering, trekked back to land. With swiftness they gathered their things and shoes, to run to the nearest fire pit to get warm, before they decided to call it a night. It was way past midnight and for many of the people on the beach, the party had just started. Still Hiccup was cold, tried and had enough entertainment for the night. They all scampered to Snotlout car and encountered a problem. Somehow it ended up with Rough Nut sitting in Fishleg's lap, with Astrid and Tough Nut squashed in the back seat, with Hiccup and Snot at the front. When they were all buckled up, Snotlout cranked up the heater and they were off. The twins' place was closest and they dropped them off first. With Fishlegs a close second. Hiccup offers to walk Astrid to her door, making Snotlout groan over dramatically. Astrid graciously still accepted. They stop awkwardly in front of the door. The lights were on the top floor, so maybe parents had already returned, but most likely the house was empty. "Thanks for tonight. I am glad we ended up having fun." "Yeah," Astrid said, wondering. Hiccup turned to leave, giving her a wave, when he was pulled back by his collar. The shock was almost too much, as he felt Astrid's soft lips on his cheek. Confusion was quickly replaced with the warmth washing over his body, his nerves sizzling and vision blurry. "Thank you for tonight." Astrid gave him one last smile. It still managed to make Hiccup's legs turn into jelly, then she closed her door. Hiccup sprinted back into the car, not sure if his legs would disappear under him, if he hesitated. Snotlout looked up from his phone, at Hiccup's flushed expression. What took you so long? Hiccup made an unintelligent noise, so Snotlout snorted and turned on the car. Being cold, tired and danced out made it really easy to fall asleep as soon Hiccup hit the pillow. One warm shower, a quick change on 2 sleeping clothes and Hiccup was gone like a light. He woke up hours later with a sore throat, and went down into the kitchen to get a cup of water. Halfway down the stairs he froze, when he heard the scuffling sound of something heavy landing on the floor. Toothless jumped, senses alert and ready to pounce. More shuffling, then a voice mumbling almost incomprehensible. But Hiccup could recognize it anyway. "Myyy Louie." His father's rusted voice rumbled from his sunken form on the floor near the entrance. Hiccup settled on the stairs, trying to make himself smaller. He could hear his father struggling to stand, and settle on sitting against the wall. Hiccup bit his lip to stay quiet as he listened in. "My love," Stoic staggered, and Hiccup realized that he was drunk. His voice was raspy, and his words blurred, making his accent even more pronounced, and the words more unclear. "My Valka." Hiccup felt a tight grip on his heart. Stoic rarely talked about his mother. "Won't you come home soon, my love? I miss my wife." Hiccup pressed the edges of his hands into his eyes. "You are missing so much, Val. You should see our son Val. He has friends now. He has a dragon now. Val, I am so proud. He was always his own person, just like you. But Val, he is just brilliant. Always were, your son. My boy. So strong." Despite Hiccup's best effort and Toothless' comforting purring, the stupid tears fall anyway. "Please come home, Val." Stoic's voice ebbed out, and something fell on the floor with a thump. Distressed Hiccup stood to help, hearing the soft snores from his father. He gathered the phone dropped on the carpet and looked at the still ongoing call. The call had gone to voicemail long ago, capturing Stoic's plea. Breathless Hiccup lifted the phone to his lips. "Love you, Mom. Come home soon." Then he ended the call. Stoic woke up the next morning, rather confused, nursing quite the hangover. He briefly noticed the blanket thrown over him and hurled himself into his bed upstairs. Many hours later he woke up to the smell of food. Hiccup was cooking on the stove in the kitchen when he walked in. He said nothing as he sat down next to Snotlout, who was already digging in. Hiccup clenched his father's shoulder and smiled as he sat down a plate in front of the man. Without any words he turned on the TV for the game, and they ate in silence. Stoic looked over to his son, and couldn't not help his own smile. Notes. Look at my 2 lovebirds being all grown up talking about their feelings. And Hiccup being all smooth and getting a sort of romantic flight under the hero moon. Enjoy the moment of fluffness, things are about to go down. Chapter 23, Everything is Fine. Summary. No, seriously. Everything is fine. Notes. This is fine. See the end of the chapter for more notes. Chapter text. Life continued. Snoggletop came and went. And so did the new year. With the new year, came a new semester. But nothing really changed for Hiccup. He went to school, he worked at the garage, he hung out with his friends, he went to football games, swim meets, track and fly, supporting his pack and his friends in any way he could. It was fine. And it was not. Hiccup knew he was different. That Toothless was different. He talked to the others about what it meant to have a dragon. And their experiences were not the same as his. They have emotions and needs based on their dragons, but they did not have overpowering, commanding, controlling impulses like Toothless did. They did not have the need to take care of the pack in the same way Toothless did. Strongfly was a nester, and made sure that the people in her near vicinity, her pack, and Astrid family were protected and happy. A trait that sometimes led to Astrid fussing over all of them. But in a lot of the cases Astrid could tell Strongfly no, and the dragon would let them be. Meatlug was content with eating, and as long as Fishlegs was happy, she did not care for more. Hookfang was a very selfish dragon that followed his own head, and rarely followed Snotlout's lead. That made both of them incredibly stubborn, but they were harmonious in that way. The twins needed each other to balance out the dragons raging in their head. So long separation and the one dragon that was split in two, would force the twins to come together. Their fused shift they experienced on the beach helped a lot, and they continued to do so to help their dragon connect. But all in all the dragons cared for their partners, and that was it. Not Toothless. Toothless felt responsible for every dragon he came in contact with. And with Hiccup growing confidence, the dragon's territory seemed to expand. The dragon felt the need to be in charge, and have the overview. He would feel out the room, and scope out the dragons, sending out calming noise from Hiccup's throat, alerting the room of his presence. Not that he would interfere, but that he was in the background, listening, observing, protecting. Hiccup did not even notice he did it, until Snotlout told him to drop it. He called it one more of Hiccup's weird dragon scenes. Along with Toothless' growing urge to set things right about him. His dragon senses, as Snotlout mocked him. Generally Snotlout felt embarrassed when Toothless wanted to interfere in dragon matters that were not his own. Splitting up disputes, reminding people about their oppressed dragons, and generally getting in people's way. What made it even more comical was, that everyone still thought Toothless was a little terror. So it was always entertaining, when a scrawny guy broke up a fight between two guys double his size, by hissing them into submission, thinking they were being scolded by a dragon the size of a chihuahua. Toothless in general had a calming effect on other dragons, that Hiccup thought was some sort of mutual respect from all the dragon's parts. Not that Hiccup could understand such. That was between the dragons, and not involving their humans. Hiccup's theory. Toothless was old. Really old. He knew most of the dragon spirits on the island, and they knew him. And one could wonder through how many incarnations. Toothless was special. Despite all of this, Hiccup still could not make a full shift. Much to his frustration, no matter what he tried, he stayed in his half-shifted state, being able to fly and to shoot plasma bolts, but never really giving in to the dragon. It was like the dragon never really wanted to. They would shift, but when Hiccup tried to push their connection further, the dragon would brush him off. Astrid was already way ahead of him, Stormfly talking over most of her body, with barely anything human left. Still not a full shift, and it left Astrid exhausted, but still. As expected of an Horferson. Mildew remarked in shifter training. Only Hiccup noticed the nerves flicker in Astrid's eyes, while the rest of the class applauded her. Hiccup and Toothless sat behind and observed. With most of the class improving their shift, the class was much more chaotic. Stray wings, heavy tails, spikes, claws and fire made the experience suddenly more dangerous than previously. Toothless seemed to think it was his job to observe this whole ordeal, making sure everybody made it out there alive. But mostly the dragon just sat back and laughed his coarse bark, at the flittering bumbling teenagers trying out their new limbs and size. He intervened in small ways, that nobody seemed to notice. Hiss at a dragon so he did not step at his neighbor's tail. Surprise another, so they did not sneeze fire in their friends' faces. Small things that went under their humans' notice, but that the dragons appreciated. Hiccup felt it all. Sitting silently watching, while Toothless propped and poked gently, conducting the procedure in a way nobody noticed. Mildew bragged to his colleagues that the number of accidents in class had gone down 86%, and of course credited his own genius. Toothless' anger boiled every time, and he and Mildew had a long staring competition, since Hiccup and Toothless still refused to shift in class. Making it the only class he ever failed. Frustrated and tired, he dumped his backpack in front of his father, emptied of ideas. "Dad. How do you shift?" Stoic half-eaten bagel was frozen in the air on the way to his mouth, and his finger still on the tablet he was reading from. Quickly he shook off the confusion and turned all his focus on his son. "You just do, son. Just do." Hiccup asked incredulously. "Yeah," his father shrugged. "You just do." Hiccup buried his face in his arms and groaned. Perplexed, Stoic hesitantly reached over a meaty hand and clapped him on the back. "It is different for everybody. You were a late bloomer. Maybe this is similar." More groaning. "You have to be patient with your dragon. If you force it against its will, it could go feral." Hiccup looked up from his arms, as his father's hand turned firm. Terrible terrors are small fierce creatures. And stubborn. Like you, he poked his son in the heart. But they are small. It will be hard on your body. Don't force it, before your body is ready for it. And if I never shift, Hiccup asked desperately, the thought digging into him. Something sad flashed over Stoic's face. But he pushed it away, but still Skull Crusher flicked in his eyes. His father nodded, and patted his shoulder. Then you do not shift, and that is okay. His stern tone made Hiccup almost want to believe Stoic believed it himself. They were both trying to accept it. Both trying to heal. It was getting better. They talked more, but the dragon was still a sore spot for both of them. Maybe, Stoic hesitated. Maybe, your body is simply not just ready. Maybe something is missing, or something is too much. And it is keeping your dragon unstable. What? It's not like having extra limbs I can chop off to make it better. The comment made Stoic grin, and Hiccup scoffed, making them both laugh, both of them knowing how clumsy and Hiccup was with all 4 limbs. Let's just wait with cutting off limbs for now. But it could be plan B. Stoic winked. Give it time. I will. Good. I wish your mother could see you. See how much you grown. Dad. Hiccup complained as Stoic messed up Hiccup's hair. The front door flew open and Snotlout announced his return from practice with a loud cry, "What's for dinner?" So it was fine. He and his dad were fine. He and Toothless were fine. The job was fine. School was school, so as fine as it gets. He had friends, he had a dragon. He and Astrid were fine. They were still friends, and her parents still dictated every part of her life, and Hiccup was still not able to be seen with her if they were near. But everything was fine. Everything was fine. Notes. Everything is fine. Chapter 24, Intruder. Summary. Something dangerous is coming this way. Notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. Chapter text. The morning started fine. Hiccup yawned and got out of his bed. Toothless was still snoring in his mind, not awake enough to be a fully conscious being in his mind. Lucky bastard sleeping in, while Hiccup clamored to get up. He met his cousin in the bathroom they shared, him looking just as dead as Hiccup felt, eye goop still stuck in his crusty eyes. Hiccup waved and reached out for his toothbrush. Snot mimicked his gesture and they brushed their teeth in silence. They both leaned down and spit at the same time, and rose to look at their drowy mirror images. Hiccup studied their equal ruffled appearances. "Am I?" Hiccup woke right up and stood taller, when he noticed. "Am I taller than you?" That seemed to wake Snotlout right up. Like an electric shock had run through him. His eyes flew open and he leaned over the sink, grabbing it to stare intensely in the mirror. "That can't be right," he grumbled. They both took a step back, standing side by side. In a similar motion, they both titled their heads first to the left, then right. Slowly Hiccup lifted his hand, feeling Toothless rise within him, wiggling with anticipation. Hiccup put a hand just on top of his head, and flicked it so it just hovered over Snotlout. There was a clear gap between Hiccup's hand and Snotlout's scalp. "No way," he rejoiced, before Snotlout tackled him. He fell down with a clank and they grappled for dominance, rolling around on the floor. "Not fair, I'm the oldest, I am still the tallest," Snotlout insisted as they rolled around, red spots appearing on his skin. Hiccup kept his scales away, but he could feel his eyes taking on a more dragon nature, as he howled in delight at his cousin's discomfort. They didn't realize they had moved from the bathroom in their ruckus, and before they noticed they tumbled down the stairs one step at a time. Growling, groaning and yammering the whole way down, still trying to get the upper hand on the other. Snotlout landed on top of Hiccup and went to bite him in a light-hearted manner, the playful side of Hookfang showing. Toothless was all in on the game, but managed to flip them before Hookfang won. Hiccup had managed to take a hold around Snotlout's arms, pinning him down as a pair of socks appeared in front of their vision. Hiccup smelled coffee grind and beard oil. "Morning, Dad," he said cheerfully, looking up at him, from his place on the floor where he pinned his cousin down. Snotlout added in equal cheerful and cherry voice. "Morning." "Fighting," Stoic said slowly with all the restraint of a man who had not finished their day's first coffee. "Outside," he said, and then the socks trotted off to the kitchen. Snotlout used the confusion to turn the tables and cried out in triumph and laughter, making Hiccup laugh as well. With a grin, Snotlout helped him off and muffled Hiccup's already fussy hair even more as they shrugged off to the kitchen for breakfast. They went to school. Snotlout went to practice, Hiccup went to hang out with Ruff before her swim training, and then he was off to the garage. After work, Gobber closed up shop and they set off to the Haddock house for dinner. Everything was fine. Until it wasn't. "Son?" Stoic asked his son, when the boy suddenly stood up and looked outside the window. But Toothless didn't hear him, and walked out to the window to look outside. Stoic opened his mouth to speak again, and asked him to return to the dinner table, but Snotlout placed a hand on his uncle's arm and shook his head slowly, sensing the tension coming from his cousin. After a moment, Toothless huffed and turned away from the window and walked out the door, with Hiccup silent in his own mind, letting the dragon take over. There was no shift as Toothless stretched their ears and sighed to listen and feel. Someone had breached the barrier. There was a threat in his territory. Hiccup was startled, but curious more than frightened over his dragon's complete overtake of his body in the middle of dinner. He didn't feel like he was going feral, so Toothless must have a pretty good reason. His father called out to them one more time, where Hiccup managed to look back at his family sitting perplexed at the dinner table. Snotlout wiring his head, Hookfang rising to his skin to follow Toothless. His father's open-mouthed silent question stuck in his expression, and even Gobber, still with a half-eaten chicken leg lifted to his mouth. It only took a moment, then Toothless hissed at them all, and tore Hiccup away and out the door, but even Hiccup understood. It was a warning to stay put. The humans may have other ideas, but Hookfang, Skullcrusher and even Grump stayed in place, keeping their humans in place. They dashed outside and out behind their house, moving towards the forest trying to find a better vantage point. They didn't take flight, the change would take too much of Hiccup's energy, but they managed to find one of the protruding cliff sides on the other side of the forest away from most of the town, where they could listen. Reaching out their senses and listening for the threat. Only here did Toothless let go and allowed his dragon ears to bubble up to extend the reach. They stood there, stretching, reaching, calculating, ears humming with all the sounds and life from the city. But they focused outside the city, outside the forest, and outside the island and across the sea. They locked onto the sound. A grueling hum from a massive, enormous body that moved slowly through the sea, prowling for their next prey. Fear settled in Hiccup's gut, while Toothless snarled. It was headed directly towards Burke. Giant feral dragon en route to Burke, the news anchor read from his teleprompter. A grayscale blurry picture was shown next to him depicting a giant mass of a dragon. The image was low quality and grainy, but the fishing boat next to the mass made it clear in size. It was like a small mountain, large with beady eyes and bumpy skin. Hiccup had just opened the door as the news anchor got into the details. He entered the living room to find his family glued to the screen. Gobber and Stoic in their own reclined chairs and Snotlout on the sofa, staring intently at the screen. Hiccup quietly wandered over to his dad's chair, placing a hand on the neck rest, looking into the screen. A growl made its way through his dragon teeth, green bleeding into his eyes, as Toothless snarled at his enemy. A gentle hand grabbed his hand, throwing Toothless out of his stupor as Hiccup looked down at his dad's serious face. "You're young, ready for a fight, but don't let it get to you. This is a fight you can't take." Toothless disagreed, but Hiccup just nodded and stepped aside as Stoic rose from his chair. "Where are you going?" Hiccup asked, rubbing his arm, as his father put on his boots, and found his badge. "I'm going down to the station. We have to figure out how we can redirect that thing away from Burke, and if we can help the mainland's government and military in some way. Leave it away from as many inhabited islands as possible." Hiccup felt the cold settle in his stomach. The giant dragon was heading to Burke, and his dad was gonna fight it. "I'm coming with you." Gobber harumphed. He did not rise as easily as Stoic had, but he sipped the last of his coffee, and then went to Stoic, waiting for him in the door. "You boys stay here. Don't leave the house, and only move if it's an emergency. Follow the guidelines if the police extend them, okay?" "Okay." Snot agreed from his spot, hands folded together with claws forming at the tip. "Okay." Stoic sent his son a stern glare, but in the end Hiccup caved and nodded. He was rewarded a fatherly pat on the shoulder, and then the two men were out the door. The car had barely left the driveway, before Hiccup found his phone and started texting, pacing in front of the TV. "Ah! What are you doing?" Snotlout complained, edging around Hiccup to see the TV. "She is not welcome here, she dares to come here. This is my territory, she can't just." "Whoa Hiccup, chill, your dragon is coming through." Hiccup shook his head, not to be overwhelmed by Toothless' destructive and invasive thoughts. "Who are you texting?" Snot asked, when Hiccup had stopped pacing. "The others." "Why?" "To get them to come here, so we can figure this out." This was key. He needed his pack. "Figure out what?" "There is nothing to figure out. Stoic told us to stay put." Snot barked, throwing the TV remote aside. "We are. For now." Hiccup reassured, but kept tapping his lengthy message. "That's why they are coming here." Hiccup yelled indignantly as Snotlout swiped his phone from his hands. "Sit down, you're not thinking clearly." He pushed Hiccup down in his father's large recliner. "Your pacing is making me nuts." "I am not." Hiccup snarled, growling deep in his throat. Snotlout crossed his arms and rolled his eyes. "Just tell me. What are you gonna do?" He stared his cousin down. "Go out there and face him yourself." No, Hiccup tried to stand, but was pushed back. Toothless barked, and Hookfang growled. "That's suicide." Snotlout reasoned, eyes flashing yellow. "Look at it." Snotlout tapped the TV screen that ran amateur footage of military vessels trying to scout out the giant monster dragon. "Look at it. What are you gonna do? It will squash you. You need a plan." Hiccup's more reasonable brain seemed to finally catch up with Toothless' overwhelming emotions. He sat back, the larger picture settling in. "That's why while you were out feeling dragony, I called the others and they are on their way here." Hiccup looked surprised at Snot, who looked smugly pleased with himself. "You are not handling this yourself?" He smirked. Hiccup crooked his head, kinda impressed. "Can't stop you from doing something stupid, that's your thing, but I can make sure you at least survive afterwards." "Snot!" Hiccup whispered, but the moment was broken when Tough Nut barreled inside yelling from the top of his lungs, with his sister and Fish Legs taking up the rear. Even with his pack around him, Toothless was still agitated. The other dragons had a calming effect on him, but Hiccup still had to fight him not to fly out and confront the beast. There was not much to do anyway. Astrid had not joined them, stuck at home with her parents, but she gave the group constant comments through text, that made Hiccup's phone almost buzz off the table. They sat comparing notes, and waited for something to happen, but nothing did. The police issued a statement to stay indoors, and it forced the others to go home, and join Astrid in spamming the group chat. But seeing the others, and seeing their dragons, feeling their presences had resolved something in Toothless. When they left, he was more quiet, more calculating, more mature. The policy kept up the ban for 24 hours, before they noticed it did not help anybody, so people was encouraged to go about their day, but no one was leaving the island as no ship, shifter, spirit or plane was supposed to go near the beast. Hiccup did not see his father in all that time. Gobber popped his head in to make sure the boys had stayed put, and there was food in the fridge. That night, they all watched the mainland's first attack and attempt to steer the feral dragon away. A reporter had sneaked in with the mission, and filmed everything on his small phone. The footage was hard to decipher, but it gave a good glimpse into the size of the beast. The press had dubbed it the Blue Giant. It made Toothless snarl. "Her name is Red Death." Gobber and Snot turned to them questioning. "What?" "Nothing." Hiccup mumbled, and tried to pull Toothless back. The official statement was that contact had been made, and the feral dragon had been pushed back, but the leaked reports showed something else. The military had made contact, and in the end the beast had been derailed off course, only to get back on course the next day. But something had gone wrong. They attacked her with ships and guns, and sent shifters in after her to survey and fire a smaller attack, and then something went wrong. The shifted started acting weird and started attacking their own comrades, and the ship they were on. They tore their ship apart and had to be shot with tranquilizer guns and captured, and even then they still thrashed in their capture, unable to make sense. Some of them escaped capture and flew off. Like they too had gone feral. Later it was revealed that some were coming back from their senses, and some were not, still stuck in their shifted state, with no human mind. The beast had not done anything itself, it had made the shifters do the work for it, and in the end just slipped back into the sea. It was grueling to watch the clips of the feral shifters trapped in their own bodies. Toothless could feel their distress even though the video they were watching on Hiccup's phone. It has done something to them, Gobber wondered and scratched his chin with his fake hand. She. The others turned to Hiccup. It's a she. Huh. Gobber grumbled. Well. With no other news, Hiccup and Snotlout went to school as normal. But nobody really focused on learning. Even the teachers. Everybody was more interested in the ongoings with the feral dragon. Instead of teaching, the teachers let the class focus on creative writing or research, while they themselves stuck to looking on their phones following the situation. The news channel had 24/7 coverage of the event, but mostly it was reruns of the footage while clever people commented and discussed the outcome and best strategies for the problem. The level of worry and panic had not reached the level to evacuate all of Berk or any of the nearby smaller island, but it had been mentioned by an old retired Gronkle naval officer, who had been invited on the news. While the news tried to cover everything, the internet exploded with conspiratorial theories, blog posts, and how to survive a primal dragon attack checklists. The pack was restless. Toothless seemed calm for once, withdrawing into Hiccup, without much to add. While everybody was at school, the next wave of attack was initiated. Though the not-so-hidden reporter, one thing was made clear. It was not only dragon shifters that were affected, and not even full-fleshed ones at that. While the strike had been filmed, soldiers next to the reporter, most in a semi-shifted state, started to behave strangely. It didn't matter if it was tiger, lion or bear. Eagles, crocodiles or moose. All of them grabbed their heads and cried out in pain and confusion. Including the otter shifter reporter. They dropped the phone, and the sound died out as the unfocused cracked camera filmed the turmoil and confusion on the deck, where the passengers thrashed on deck. Before the camera dropped, Hiccup was sure he heard something. Later that night, his pack gathered around him. He sat down and replayed the video over and over again. Fishlegs scanned the newsfeed, trying to bring out the highlights to his friends, while the twins were more focused on how to survive articles. Astrid sat stiffly next to Hiccup, like she expected an attack at any moment. That somehow made Snotlout act as a proper host, and he supplied the group with drinks and snacks from the kitchen, and kept cleaning up after them. Hiccup supposed it was a way to keep his hands busy. Hookfang's red scales bubbled up from time to time on Snotlout's body, and it was clear the dragon itched for a fight. Football practice and all other after-school activities were cancelled, and there was no way for the agitated dragons to let loose. Here, look at this. Fishlegs shoved his phone and showed an article to Hiccup. The article was with a video of a very distraught woman, who swore that the monster was her husband. It looked more like the woman was interested in her 15 minutes of fame, than her poor husband. Hiccup doubted it was true. But was caught Hiccup's eyes were the article under the one Fishlegs pointed on. It was small and unnoticeable, between the larger headlines focusing and centering about the monster. Someone had broken into the food storage down at the pier. Toothless twitched. Fish. Hiccup broke off a Fishlegs rant about possibilities and factors for going feral, and the whole pack focused on Hiccup. Have you seen other articles like this? Fishlegs leaned over and looked. His ears shifted involuntarily to Gronkle ones, and tickled Hiccup in the face with their nervous fluttering. Maybe. I have to check. Please do. Fish and the twins set out with a new course and started their drive into the rabbit hole. The mainland had a break-in at an industrial meat factory. All unproduced meat was stolen, and even some of the live ones as well. Rough Nut said from her spot, chewing at the tip of her pen. Tough Nut leaned over. The farm right next to it was robbed of some of their dairy cows. Apparently they were abducted by aliens, since they disappeared into thin air. The fishmonger, King's Crown Meat, Livestock, Fishlegs summed up. A lot of this stuff is happening, but nobody seems to think they are connected. They all turned to Hiccup, who was still reviewing the reporter's video. He left his seat and casted his feed to the TV in the room. Then he turned up the sound, making the room around him complain, but Toothless' eyes narrowed as they filleted out the noise from the screaming sailors, ship creaking and helicopter fins. "Listen!" they hissed, and the pack around him obeyed. "What is that?" Astrid asked disgustedly, her scales flaring up. The pack around them scuffled. Fishlegs pulled up his laptop, and turned off the TV, to the others complaining. He pulled out his movie editing program and downloaded the reporter's video. He was no expert in video or sound editing, but he did manage to remove some of the foreground sound, so they were left with the background noise, as the clip replayed again and again. Fishlegs turned up the volume, and between the hum of the engine of the military ship, was another hum. As it filled up the room, the dragons roared out in confusion and agitation, making their humans cry out as well. Especially Hookfang and Meatlug, who were partly shifted. Hiccup covered his ears and screamed, "Shut that off!" Toothless roared in his mind, but it was Astrid that sprang into action to take the laptop from an agitated Fishlegs. Tough Nut's shifted fist cut off the noise by punching through the screen of the laptop, cutting it off immediately. Hiccup hissed and huffed, gathering his thoughts, Toothless restless in his mind. Fishlegs stared at his destroyed laptop. Astrid was the first who spoke. "It's a beehive. It's using worker dragons. Look," she turned on the TV on the news feed, replaying the second strike on the feral dragon. "It makes people go primal to take over their dragons, to give it food. It doesn't do anything itself." "So what?" Tough growled, inspecting his hands from glass splints. "So we have to break its control. Free the other dragons, of course." Hiccup said, excited, and Astrid nodded just as excited. "Of course." Snotlout growled, rolling his eyes at Hiccup's tone. "Something so big must have a hideout, right? Somewhere to rest and sleep. A cave, a hole, a nest." Hiccup walked around waving his hands, trying to explain his raging troughs. "A nest." Fishlegs picked out the remains of his broken laptop. "Yeah. We find the nest and then we find her." Hiccup clapped his own hands excitedly. "And do what exactly?" Snotlout snarled. "Free the other dragons." Hiccup threw his arms up. "You're crazy," Rough Nut remarked from her spot on the couch. Then lowered her voice. "I like that." Astrid showed off her fangs in a hiss, but Rough Nut just hissed back, showing off her own fangs. "Not now." Hiccup scolded. Astrid scowled, but Rough Nut smirked and winked at her, then laid a comforting arm around the nervous Fishlegs, who was muttering statistics under his breath. "So we find a boat and then," Hiccup kicked off. "Guys," Snotlout interjected. "You have to steal a boat." Tough Nut added. "Borrow." Hiccup insisted. "Guys," Snotlout yelled. "What?" He lifted up his phone for Hiccup to see. Hiccup reached out as he read the first line, heart trumping in fear in his chest, Toothless shrieking in his head. "Police Chief Stoic joins in an effort to defeat and contain the feral dragon." "Dad." A text beeped into his phone. "I love you, son." He was out the door in a moment, his legs moving on their own. Snot only followed him long enough to throw him the car keys. He jumped in the vehicle and sped away. He reached the harbor where the military vessel was fueling, stocking on supplies and loading up volunteers to join the fight. A crowd had gathered of journalists from both Berks and other islands, together with a small worried crowd with the locals waving goodbye. Hiccup parked, and jumped out of the car, searching desperately for his father. "Dad!" He hurled towards him, pushing noisy reports out of his way to get to him. Stoic grabbed him as he stumbled and took him aside so the press could not overhear their conversation. "Dad, you cannot, please Dad, don't. She'll kill you. Dad, please. Don't." His breath was ragged and his words came out stumbling. "I have to." Hiccup. "All full shifters have to help make an effort." "No Dad, she'll kill you. She'll take over your mind." "She'll," someone shouted for Stoic's attention. "I have to go, son. Please Dad, please don't." He was pulled into a bear hug, that turned more dragon with each second. Stoic started to feel more scale under Hiccup's cheeks, and he knew it was more than just his father saying goodbye, but Skull Cruiser as well. "Dad, please don't." Hiccup sobbed into the large man's chest. His own nails turned into claws so he could cling to his father, his cries turning more animalistic, as Toothless wailed for his human. Skullcrusher huffed warm air into Hiccup's face, like he had done when he was little, and his father gave him one last squeeze before he let go, and put on the stern chief face again. Then he disappeared into the crowd towards the ship. Hiccup staggered for a moment before he tried to push into the crowd, but was cut off by some military personnel. Not a dragon, he noted, but he huffed and puffed at them anyway, showing off his unimpressive teeth. They just sneered at him and pushed him back. Hiccup stumped back, evading to get crushed by the crowd. He looked frantically around and spotted a protruding cliff above the harbor. The same one he had stood on previously. He ran away from the crowd and took flight, letting Toothless take over as they ran. His large wings flapped fast and they landed softly, but abruptly on the top, staring over the crowd and the ships, and the military to get a glimpse of Stoic, but the ship was already moving out, and all personnel gone from the deck, making Stoic impossible to make out. Hiccup and his dragon cried out a gut-wrenching cry. Astrid found him there later. The rest of the pack joined them shortly. She sat down next to him, and rested her head on his shoulder, Stormfly humming soothingly. Hiccup sat in his half-shifted state, ears and wings dropping, wings flat against the ground, head hidden in his knees. What now? Hiccup looked up and over the ocean. The tears dried out and there was only determination left. His core burned hot. Now. I'm gonna teach your guys to shift, he growled, determined. Then I'm taking the fight to her. Notes. So now we are going into the end stretch. Hold on to your hats. Chapter 25, The Nest. Summary. Hiccup and his pack face the intruder. Notes. Chapter warning, violence and blood. See the end of the chapter for more notes. Chapter text. The feeling of déjà vu was strong as they flew towards the nest. Hiccup could only go by the feeling from his dragon, agitated and restless, but somehow laser-focused on their destination. He did not sped ahead as he could, but kept in tow as his pack struggled to follow him. Hiccup had pulled all of his ticks out the book to help his friends reach into their dragons enough to make the shift enough to fly. As always, Astrid was in the lead with the most complete transformation. She had already been able to fly for some time, while the others had struggled. Unable to leave them behind, and they unable to let him go alone, Toothless helped the dragons and their humans settle into their skin. Somehow both Hiccup and Toothless knew they could not do this alone, not without their pack. He was at the head, with Astrid and Stormfly right behind him. Fishlegs, Meatlug, Snotlout and Hookfang behind them, with the twins merged together at the rear. Snotlout flew on Hiccup's other side, his form long and gangly but airborne and fighting ready. Hookfang's long horns and protruding fangs made him look more terrifying than he was. His fear and uncertainty was still there, and it had been the worst hurdle to overcome with his transformation. But he had done it. For a brief moment he had shifted completely, then it faded away to his now unruly form, but still able to fly. Able to follow Hiccup. It was clear he would not give up. Fishleg's whole body was transformed, his small wings buzzing and carrying their large corpus forwards. His face was not, making it quite funny looking with a human face on top of his dragon body. It was clear to Hiccup that Fishleg's logic and head was what was holding him back from a full-fledged shift. The twins were struggling the most. With a common goal in mind, they have unified their lower body into a passable dragon shape with wings that could carry them. Their upper bodies were covered in scales, with horns and fangs, with the shift was uneven and splotchy. Their eyes were yellow, and their fingers elongated into talons, but else very human despite their dragon bottom. There were a limited amount of scales on their necks, and their teeth had almost stayed mostly human. One of Tough Nut's arms was fused to his body, and Rough Nut was struggling with the duality of her dragons. They both panted to keep up the pace. They both fought for control with each other and their dragons. It was hard being two, trying to align. But being five in one body, must be a lot. Still Toothless lead them on. Hiccup tried to keep his head calm. Find a way, a path. Somehow they could make it out intact. His more logical part of him was screaming how crazy it was, but another part of him was shouting how natural it was. Like the first time plummeting over a cliff and saving himself. Toothless lived for this. Despite the danger and the beast ahead, he thrived at the head of the pack. In control and leading with a goal in mind, and the pack at his tail. Toothless knew it had to be them, who stopped the primal dragon. Why was it them? Because he was different from the rest of the dragons, and he was one of the only ones that stood a chance. The overwhelming confidence from this dragon was confusing, but Hiccup felt the ease to just slip into the dragon's head and the dragon's skin. His doubt and control was slipping. He was interrupted by Snotlout managing to swing up next to him. His long neck made it easy to talk to him, even if his body was many paces behind. So question. Snotlout barked as they soared over the sea. The sound of the winds and their beating wings was drowning out in Hiccup's ears, making Snotlout harder to hear. How do we ensure we don't go feral? He shouts. You know. When we get there. Mind over matter. Hiccup and Toothless roars back at him. They speed up just to spite them. Astrid and Stormfly followed effortless, but the others grunted with the effort. Right. Mind, Snotlout could not help to look back at the quarreling twins. They are holding up so far, fused by the hip as they were, but it did not stop them from fighting. Still there was a real possibility that they would unfuse, unshift and then crash into the sea. They truly look more weird than the rest of them. Wherefore Hiccup and the rest their dragons have fused into their human features, making it more natural. The twins stuck out like a sore thumb. Their fused bottom half had taken on more and more the shape of a green-skinned, yellow-bellied dragon, with full functioning wings and a split tail. But instead of a dragon neck, the twins were as a freaky dragon double centaur. Keep a human mind when landing. Hiccup yelled back over Toothless roars. The queen will try to go after the dragon's mind, but we will not let her. Use your talents sparingly. Don't let your dragon exalt themselves enough to be taken over. The more human the better. As much as the dragons protest, it made the most sense. Use the human as a shield so she could not use their dragon half against them. They arrived to chaos. The fight against the queen dragon had ended up on a large deserted island, mostly hidden by a deep fog covering the whole island, and hiding it from view. It was mostly a dying volcano deep within the mountain, surrounded by pebble sand beaches, and the whole island was deemed uninhabitable. No natural animal lived there. Except for the large beast that had slumbered underneath the mountain. The large crater in the side of the volcanic mountain only backed up Hiccup's theory. It looked like the creature slumped back in its hole each time it was fed and content to sleep. But not now. The queen was very much awake, roaring against the small army of military and shifters trying to force it back into its crater. They crash-landed on the beach in midst of the chews, among rapid humans and shifters fighting each other, while simultaneously trying to fire at the queen. Small camps were settled around the beach, with people running around, shouting and fighting. Some of the camps had been trampled by the fighting, and there was a clear effort trying to evacuate further down the beach, but the siren song from the queen made it impossible. This may have started as a coordinated effort with a clear plan of attack, but now it was chaos. The commanding officers were all shifted and under the queen's control, and no one seemed to be in control anymore. Hiccup and his friends ran and hid through their chaos, trying to cover their ears and keeping control. They ran through the remains of a trashed camp where a radio was blistering, the mainland trying to get contact. The fog was making the signal hazy, and no phone signal was available, leaving the island cut off from the rest of the effort. Hiccup grabbed the microphone and held the button down. Commanding officers lost to Red Death, please send backup for extraction, medical assistance needed, but don't shift, that is how she gets you. Who the hell are you, what is going on? The frantic woman on the other end snapped. Send backup. Don't shift. Hiccup snarled back and dropped the mic. What the hell? Was that a kid? How did he get there? Hey kid, get me. But Hiccup was already moving, weaving in and out of people of shifters, trying not to get hit on the way. Of course in the middle of the fighting he saw his dad. And unfortunately he was not doing great. Skullcrusher was out trashing, his dad shouting in between roars, attacking both friends and foes. They all skidded to a halt and hid behind a damaged field tent. We need to break their control. Incapacitate their dragons. He looked behind him at his pack. Tough, rough, make some noise, distract them. Maybe we can get enough to snap out of it and help us even the field. On it. They both shouted and cracked some of the equipment laying strewn around. They had unfused and were still covered in scales. They ran through the masses banging their newfound instruments, shaking people up, giving the re-humans a chance to get the upper hand. Fish. Hiccup turned to his friend. Fishleg's body was getting less and less dragon by the minute, exhausted by the trip. I can't see, he said, squinting at the queen. I need to get closer. Hiccup twisted, his wings barely missing his friend. Snot, go with him, protect him, find me a weak spot. But Snot protested, getting up from his crouch. I got him. Astrid reassured. Go. Snot loud nodded, and he and Fishlegs ran towards the queen to get a better look. Astrid, help me get to my dad. I got your back, she roared, and followed him. They weaved around, evading stray claws, hooves and teeth. Toothless roared, making some falter and fall back, but most of the time, Strongfly watched them with her spiked tail, making them draw back, clearing a path towards Stoic. When they got close enough, Toothless bared his teeth and roared Skullcrusher in the face into submission, even quieting the other shifter around him. Stoic shook his head, sitting on his knees. Groaning. Son. Stoic mustered, confused, the light returning to his eyes. Dad. Hiccup chuckled, relieved, and surged in for a hug. His dad caught him, still ruffled and confused, ready to give him a fit, but hesitated when he got a good look. Hiccup. What, wings, what? Not now. We need to get away. Hiccup hiked his father's arm around his shoulder, to drag him back to the tent. Strongfly howled around them, sending spikes flying, clearing a path as they hobbled forth. Despite Toothless' strength, Hiccup was already tired, and his father was much larger and heavier than him. They managed to get back to the tent where Snot and Fishlegs were already waiting. Hiccup plopped his father down with a groan and shook out his wings. So? Well. Fish hesitated. Its eyes are small, even if there are 6 of them. So no blind ankle, but small, and big nose. So relying on hearing and smelling. It will probably flake in the same way normal dragons would. It was very distracted by the twins' rackle. So noise. Hiccup panted. Pretty much. Right. Yo Hick, we found more adults. The twins returned with a straggled-looking band of adults. Who the hell are you? Snarled a man who was still half bare, but looked good enough to be in charge. The teenager in charge, unless you get your butt in gear. Toothless snarls, berating the bear. He opened his mouth to shout but was cut off. We need to break her control. We think sound may distract her. She is a dragon after all. I have contacted the mainland and asked for backup and medical assistance, but we need to get people off the beach and away from her. And don't shift. She takes over the shifters. The bear and Toothless started each other down. Well. The bear grumbled. You heard him. Get in gear, let's move. Nodding, Hiccup turned back to his father and let the man do their job. His father's hand found his face, roaming them over his features, feeling the bumps and the scales, shuffling through his hair, touching his ears. Son, you're dragon. Long story, Dad. I'll tell you later, okay? We need to go. Get to safety. The sound was so much, so many dragons. His dad grabbed his arms. This does not change anything. I am proud of you, son. I know, Dad. No, I was always proud. Even before. Just did not know how. I love you. I love you too. Hiccup smiled. Let's go. With Astrid's help, they lifted the large man and started following the evacuation orders. The noise was unbearable. Among the struggling, was the constant hum from the queen. Trying to take over. His dad made a groan and a hand went to the side. Dad, you're bleeding. A large dark spot was forming on his shirt. Got pierced. It's okay. Skullcrusher can heal it. He closed his eyes. Dad, no. Skullcrusher thrashed and snarled. No, 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 don't shift. Hiccup cried. His dad was flagging, making it hard to keep him walking. No no no, don't shift, don't shift. Toothless growled, the fires of his mouth spreading, resolution spreading. Astrid, get behind me. Don't shift. They roared, Astrid and Stormfly right behind him, helping Stoic snap out of it. The man shook his head. Skullcrusher squealed and they went on. More was following, but a lot was still blocking their way. Hiccup handed over the weight of his father to Astrid, and snarled at the dragons in their path. Toothless barked, turning the dragons' attention towards him. A few started to attack, but Toothless snarled, stood his ground and roared at them. A couple snapped back to their human self, collapsing on the ground, while some still remained human but flew away, towards the evacuation area. How did you do that? Astrid shouted. I don't know. Come on. They followed the flow, meeting up with the twins, Snot and Fish. We need to keep moving. The hum was getting stronger, the queen growing more agitated. She was finally registering, she was losing followers. The effort was finally paying off, but still not overwhelming. She broke through the entrance of her cave, sending rock and stones flying out, scattering her attackers, but also the fleeing. She spewed fire and lava, sending people and shifters scattering. Shit! Hiccup shrieked. Then turned to the twins. Guys, distract her. Make something explode. You're good at that. On it. The twins agreed with abnormal unity, as they merged together to one body again, and took off. Fish Legs was all human again, but grabbing his ears. Make some noise. Hiccup commanded, reaching over and handed out a banged-up lid of a metal cooler. Snot and Fish nodded and ran ahead, baiting the metal eagerly. Astrid snarled as Stormfly fired another round of spikes protecting Hiccup's circle. They finally made it to the group of gathered people. The dragons were howling in Hiccup's ears, the fog in his mind thick as Toothless fought on. This had to stop. Their efforts were not enough. The queen knocked her large club-like tail into the side of the mountain, starting a rock slide, making them have to run back towards her. A commanding officer shouted over the noise, and a cackle of people retreated back to fight her. Someone knocked into Hiccup, making fall on the ground, hitting his head, sound ringing in his ears. Hiccup. Astrid and Stoic were on him, helping him up, but his eyes were hazy and the noise deafening. This isn't working. He sighed. We need to do something else. He looked around at the people, and half-sifted gathered around him. And his dad. He was showing sign of shift, but clung to his side, where he had been pierced. He had no energy to do a shift, and even if he did, the queen would take over Skullcrusher's mind. He reached out and found Astrid's strong hand. He squeezed his hand tight. Hard and comforting. There was a roar behind him, shaking the ground. Everyone grabbed their ears. The twins had succeeded, and now landed in a crash, their bodies breaking up the shift, and their dragons cried out. They landed next to them, falling from each other, heaving and groaning with the hard landing. Immediately a man in military garb ran over to them, helping them up. Fish ran over to Rough and Snot to Tough. They all looked tired, banged up and frightened. Only Astrid was able to keep up her shift like Hiccup was. Pure stubbornness, no doubt. His hand received another squeeze. The queen roared again and spread out her large wings upwards. She has wings. Toothless roared, as an idea formed in Hiccup's head. Stormfly answered his call, and eye twitching as Astrid struggled for control against the queen. Evacuate the beach, he commanded Astrid. Her eyes widened, at first refusing to let go of his hand, shaking her head. But Hiccup kept nodding at her, until she nodded back at him reluctantly and turned to fly back. Hiccup grabbed her arms before she could return. Then shift back. Tell everybody to shift back, don't give her more weapons to use. But you, she placed her forehead against his. The force, roughness of her scales and warmth comforting. Steadying. He pressed back. Now. I'll be all right. I have Toothless. Astrid nodded and took off down to the beach. She started shouting orders, echoed by Snot and Fish on the ground, pushing the crowd away from the queen. A few protested and Stormfly roared, then all into submission, helped by Skullcrusher before all signs of the dragon left Stoic's body. Hiccup did not have time to focus more on the ruckus on the beach, and the queen made a move to attack again. He needed to be faster, he needed to be stronger, he needed to be more precise. The world was ringing. Then silence. Then clarity. "Bring me back afterwards, okay, Toothless?" Toothless hummed, then Hiccup let himself slip away. It was a strange feeling, as he let go. Like he was floating in water, not feeling his bones broke and reshaped and muscles contorted, and scales grew. He could feel the strain as his body reshaped, growing stronger, leaner and more powerful. Heat built in their belly and they soared and took flight, aiming their first shot for her eyes. It hit. Of course it did. Their aim was perfect. They never missed. Sound became muffled as winds filled their ears as they rose, roaring their challenge. "Come get me!" Hiccup yelled, but it came out as a roar from Toothless as their fully shifted dragon body shifted in the air. It worked and the monster took the bait and lifted its massive body up in the air, making the ground shake from the force. More interested in them than the other ants running around in the ground. Her humming breaking. Slowly she gained in on them. But they were faster, and smarter. She was the trespasser. Coming into their territory, messing up their island, injuring their father/chief. She would have to go. So they dove in, swirled around her and let a plasma bolt hit every time they passed, hitting from a new angle at every time. She had no help, having her minions fled and being freed from control, no one was coming to her aid, and stopping their attack. She was on her own. She was vulnerable. She shrieked out her song, calling for her lackeys. But the few still under control were quietly knocked out on the beach, when the people around found out what she was trying to do. They attacked her relentlessly. Hiccup analyzing where to hit, making the most of it, as Toothless flew and took aim, firing at Hiccup's will, so in sync. Hiccup had never felt lighter and heavier at the same time. The shift was wonderful, he felt whole in a way one never knew he missed, but he missed this. Had missed Toothless. She moved suddenly. Her wings hitting them, spiraling them out of course. They managed to steer clear and took higher. Smoke and clouds making it hard to navigate for them, but also for her. She appeared out of nowhere, smacking her large jaw open to swallow them whole. They just barely avoided it. Something hit them in the side, and a gash opened on their stomach. They had to be more careful. Hiccup could feel his power draining, making it difficult to stay conscious, the shift draining him, not ready to hold all the power that was his dragon. His dragon. Who he was gonna protect. They would protect. Together. He roared with Toothless and climbed higher, making the queen follow. Taunting her. Hiccup looked down into her large maw, as she prepared to spew a propeller of flames and lava up into the air. He felt faint, because of the air, smoke or the shift he could not take any more. Aim for the mouth. He thought before he fell. Toothless took over. Hiccup had no more mentally capability to fathom more, as Toothless twisted around and fired a blast directly into the mouth of the beast. He felt the fight leave them, and the shift failing. The monster roared and its inside lit on fire, a small explosion starting from her jaw and then went through her body, expanding all the way down to her tail. She was still fighting to maintain control, before she crashed, her large form still warped around Hiccup and Toothless, making escape impossible. Hiccup gathered the last he had and opened his eyes. He stopped the shift using all his focus to keep the current state, keeping their wings and tails out, so they could fly away. Toothless trashed and flung away from the large burning monster, zigzagging between the dragon's spikes, bumps and appendices. Hiccup felt the burn below the knee, but did not have time to comprehend that. He needed to keep the shift, keeping them aloft and in the air, so they could get away. Something large hit them, sending them crashing in the wrong direction. Her wing, Hiccup thought, before the shift failed him again. Toothless cried out, and Hiccup breathed out in pain, and the pain became worse. It burned, hot, agonizing pain, muscle straining pain everywhere, only Toothless cries making him find focus again. He forced his body to obey, to once again let Toothless take over. He felt the shift one more time, a full shift as it washed over him, Toothless roaring in triumph and something else. They would make it. They had to. The burning sensation was in Hiccup's human leg, had left with the shift, but had moved somewhere else. The sensation was faring and Hiccup could not place the source of the hurt. He kept losing focus. In the end, a confident roar convinced Hiccup that they were gonna be okay. The air shook around them and the monster body hit the ground. Smoke and the smell of burning flesh filled his nostrils. Then he lost consciousness, hearing Toothless cry filling up his ears in sorrow. "Please don't go feral," Hiccup whispered. Notes: I took a break in December. Hope you enjoy the new update. Chapter 26, Aftershock. Summary. Time to wake up. Notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. Chapter text. It hurt. His whole body ached, but in his mind Toothless sang with joy and relief. It washed over him and calmed the burning itch all over him, the dragon taking up his mind and focus. They survived. They killed the monster. The trespasser was gone. They were safe. The island was safe. Hiccup was safe. This was the most important information for Toothless. Concern and love ran through him in waves, one more intense than the other. The dragon filled up his senses. When Hiccup gained more consciousness again, Toothless clambered down enough so he could blink through the white light in his vision and start to take in his surroundings. There was a tube in his nose, and a drip in his arm. Toothless wanted to rip them out. There were bandages. So many, and his leg. His left leg felt wrong. Toothless cooed. And Hiccup felt him. He felt wrong too, or right. It was hard to explain. Like the dragon had been off balance before and now had regained the right balance. Images flashed past Hiccup's vision and mind. Designs of a weird contraption in various renditions. Made out of metal, steel, bone, leather, brass, the design and look changed with each, but the concept stayed the same. A tail something. He would have to let it go for now, store it away and try to make sense of it later. Something shifted next to his bed. The plastic chair cracked. Hiccup noticed the machine beeping now, as a massive hand came to rest on him. "Hi Dad." Hiccup croaked. His dad's massive face taking up his view. His eyes were red and tear-stained, but they crinkled in a smile when they looked at him. "My brave, stupid boy," he said fondly, and placed a soft kiss on the top of Hiccup's head. "Do you know where you are? Do you know what happened?" Out of the corner of his eye, he saw his father push a button on a table. "My guess is hospital," he croaked. Stoic lifted a cup and water to his lip and he drank, thankfully getting rid of the coarseness in his throat. The tubes in his nostrils were uncomfortable, but it helped with breathing, so he had no urge to tear them out, like his dragon. Stoic helped him sit up better. "Hospital is right. You have been in surgery for quite some time. Gave me quite a scare. I swear you're trying to kill your old man of worry." Hiccup chuckled at the forced joke, and coughed. Stoic looked pitiful at him but did not say more. "It hurts, Dad," Hiccup said, and his dad nodded with even more sadness. "I know," he said, tears filling up his eyes. "I know." A door opened. Hiccup did not see it, but he heard. His senses were dulled, and Toothless dragon senses were out of whack. Properly the painkillers, Hiccup thought as a white lab coat appeared in his periphery. "Doctor." "Right. Hospital." What he thought was a nurse, was bustling around and the man talked. "Man. Woman. Hiccup was only coherent enough to answer the yes and no questions. Something about physical therapy, whatever that was. Toothless hissed, and a bit of his hiss left Hiccup's mouth as well. Stoic growled at him not to hiss at the doctors, so Hiccup hissed at him instead. The doctor was quiet as father and son growled at each other for a moment before turning their attention on the doctor once more. "Dragons." The doctor sighed annoyed and continued with his work. Hiccup leaned back and slipped away once more as the nurse injected something into his drip. The edges dulled and he drifted away, Toothless growling in annoyance. When he woke the second time, he was much more coherent and able to have an actual conversation with the doctor. Some of his left leg was gone. That was it. The doctor said it as matter-of-factly, like Hiccup had not just lost a vital part of himself. His dad was quiet, properly had had much more time to process the fact than Hiccup had. Toothless seemed fine with it. Not crippled by the bare thought, sending waves of reassurance through Hiccup, so he did not cry in front of the doctor. He would have to do physical therapy to get his legs back to working condition again, and then they would talk prosthetics. Hiccup had this odd feeling, that whatever they presented to him, he could make it better for some reason. Properly the drugs talking. That, and toothless. When the doctor left, Stoic told him what had happened. The Queen had exploded in the air as its burning corpse crashed to the ground. Luckily no one was hurt. But Hiccup had been caught in the slipstreams between him and the body, and gotten hit on the way down. His shift had failed in the end, but had managed to maintain a half shift long enough to keep him in the air, but his legs caught fire, and as Hiccup lost consciousness, Toothless took over in full dragon form and they crash-landed on the other side of the beach. Stoic and a couple of others had run to him, while the military staff started to put out the burning dragon corpse, call for emergency transport and other backup they needed. Most was already on the way, thanks to Hiccup's brief contact with the lady on the radio. They tied up the dragons that had gone primal, most of them somehow regained their consciousness, but some still were thrashing in their feral state. Most though did not have any after effects from the Queen and were cleared by a psych evaluation, performed by emergency personnel upon arrival. They moved the primal dragons, and other humans that had been sympathizers to the Queen for later interrogation. Hiccup's friends passed and were safe. Astrid and Snot had joined Stoic in the search for Hiccup. When they found him, he was in a cocoon of his own wings, and as they poked it, the shift faded away, leaving behind a bruised and battered Hiccup, but breathing Hiccup. He was flown by helicopter off the island and directly into a hospital on the mainland, as Burke was already dealing with the trauma patients that were already flowing in from the attack. The hospital removed what was left of his destroyed left shin and foot, and when he was stable enough a couple of days later, he was transferred to Burke Memorial Hospital, where he was now. He was not permitted visitors yet. There were a bunch of reporters and some military high-hats from the mainland that wanted to question him. Gobber was keeping them all at bay at the moment with help from Astrid and Stromfly. Hiccup didn't want to think about the bureaucratic mess he had created, but told his dad to keep them away as much as possible. Hiccup felt he needed to address the elephant in the room. Or rather the dragon. Dad, Hiccup looked down at his hands. I don't think my body can handle a full shift yet. I know, son. Stoic pulled his plastic chair closer, and put a giant hand on top of his son's. But you did it. You did it. I'm so proud of you. He kept stroking Hiccup on the top of his head with the other hand. Long calming strokes. Toothless. That is his name. Hiccup breathed out. Yeah. Stoic smiled. I would very much like to meet him. Hiccup let the shift happen naturally. Scowls spurted over his face, and his eyes bled green with square black pupils. Hiccup was still there, but was more in the background as Toothless hummed at Hiccup's father. Thank you. For saving my son. His hand lay heavy on his cheek, and Toothless leaned into the touch. Just as tired and drained as Hiccup felt. A shift in Stoic as well as green and red scales grew on what skin was exposed between the beard and the bushy eyebrow. His nose turned pointy and sharp as Skull Crusher showed his face, and replaced Stoic. The two dragons met, foreheads rested against each other, rumbling, humming and cooing at each other. Communicating in more ways than their human half could ever do with words. Hiccup felt the calm, spreading through his veins. But it could also have been the painkillers. He didn't care. He fell further and further into the darkness, as the dragon cooed and hummed, lulling him to sleep. The last thing he noticed was his dad continued stroking his hair, and the other hand wrapped around his hand, grounding him. When he woke, he asked if his friends could come see him and was denied. The doctors were still not happy with his progress. After getting impatient with their lack of progress and the doctors nor answering how long it would take him to recover, Hiccup started to lick his wound behind the doctor's back. With some helpful effect. His dad never left his side. Toothless was a constant reminder. They may be able to keep his friends away, but Hiccup's fears became true. It was not long before a team of grim-looking government officials came knocking at his door. Two tight-looking men, with their own government-financed team of researchers and doctors, flanked by a burly-looking guy with an Australian accent. Stoic kicked them out the moment he saw them. But they kept coming back. Their numbers diminished, but Hiccup knew he could not keep pretending to be asleep when they arrived. To his surprise, he was not facing any punishment despite endangering himself, his friends, and interfered with a military mission. They only wanted to talk about Toothless. His Night Fury. His very rare, S-class rated dragon, that had not been reincarnated in over 200 years. They wanted to help him, they said. They would pay for all his medical bills and any further treatment that the insurance would not cover. Especially the very expensive prosthetics he would need. They wanted to make sure he was cared for. Let him train in their private facility. Pay for his education in one of the finest schools in the country. Their very fancy privately owned facilities. Help him hone his skills. Observe him. He would just have to come in for some health checks and samples. Hiccup smelled a rat. Toothless was furious. He could not be contained. He was a free dragon. Hiccup was not gonna let them get even a sniff of his dragon. And legally they could not. Hiccup was a minor, so they had to go through his very stubborn, very angry dad. Who had lawyered up, right after the men's first attempted visit. Hiccup was sitting with his arms crossed in his bed, glaring down a team of doctors and government officials. No, Toothless hissed. You stay away from me, and I will not do anything you say. The men began to protest, the doctors rolling their eyes. The muscle man at the door lifted an impressed eyebrow. His green eyes followed every movement Hiccup made. Hiccup had pinpointed all the other dragons in the room, even the Arctic fox and reindeer that alternated as his nurses. But that man, he could not pin down, and it annoyed him. Annoyed Toothless. The first official, a nadder with a bad attitude, bristled at Hiccup, making him turn his attention to him. Do you have any idea what responsibility you have now? You have the first known alpha species dragon known for over a century. There was that word again. Alpha. A muffled memory of Iret's smiling face came to mind, but else the word made no sense. The pain meds muffled with his memory. The Gronkel researcher piped in. He was young, clearly not used to negotiating. His eagerness ruined his superior's ruse. We have to study it. The implication, the power. No, Hiccup repeated. A real Night Fury. It could. Both Hiccup and his dad scoffed in identical fashion. And by it you mean me. Me, a 15 years old. No, I am still just Hiccup Terrible Terror. There were no cameras out on the island, no recordings of such, and I tend to keep it that way. His dad nodded in agreement. They had already discussed this beforehand. Their lawyer stood stone-faced behind them, watching the proceedings. Unless that is what you want. For everyone to hear about the great Night Fury, who took down a feral dragon, when an entire fleet of adults could not. The nadder paled. His frown turned sour. They were essentially sent as damage control, and they wanted Hiccup to sign a non-disclosure agreement. Hiccup was using it as his only wager over his freedom. He looked to his dad, who nodded. I want to continue with school, get my education, and we'll see where my path leads. You have no claim on me, or him. He looked to the lawyer, who nodded, content with his response. I have nothing else to say to you. His nurse opened the door to show his unwanted visitors out. She flashed Hiccup a wink. Can you at least give us a blood sample? The eager Gronkel researcher asked, hesitating in the doorway. Besides the one you have already confiscated from the hospital. No, I will not. They left, and Hiccup sighed in relief. His lawyer clapped his shoulder and gathered his stuff to leave. So what, you're just gonna keep living in hiding? They asked. If it stops, people like them will think they can come in here and try to control me. Then yes. Be careful. At some point the truth will come out. Stoic held his son's hand, reassuring him. I made my decision. Okay. Notes. Disclaimer, I am not a medical professional, I have no idea what sort of treatment Hiccup would need and have tried to keep it vague not to spread misinformation. Thanks for following along and the patience of waiting for more chapters. We are almost at the end. Chapter 27, New Reality. Summary. Time to live with the consequences. Notes. Chapter warning, recovery from injury, and tooth rotting sweet fluff. Read at your own discretion. See the end of the chapter for more notes. Chapter text. He was finally let out of bed. His doctor and nurse were milling around unhooking him and talking his ear off. He was not really listening to them, as he sat on the side of his bed in a hospital gown. His father sat in his usual chair looking rather nervous. Hiccup's head felt heavy, like there was cotton in his ears. They had been slowly cutting down on his meds, but he had just received a shot so he could try walking with a cane to start with. Test out his reflexes and the strength of his muscles. Something felt wrong. Before Hiccup could process, he fell forward towards the floor, his consciousness fading into black. His father jumped up with a shout, and the nurse scrambled towards him. Neither of them was close enough, and Hiccup was sure he was gonna hit the white linoleum floor. Instead, two strong dragon legs hit the floor, breaking the fall. Hiccup blinked back to reality, his vision suddenly sharper, and the fuzziness gone. He felt stronger too. He felt all the way down, stretching his hind legs, feeling both of them move. His wings rustled and his tail swooshed behind him. Around him, the nurse and doctor screamed about him calming down, but Hiccup felt totally calm and relaxed. Suddenly his father was in front of him, holding out his hands in front of him, like he was a large charging animal. Right. Dragon. The full shift had happened so seamlessly, Hiccup had not noticed his body had turned dragon. Toothless and Hiccup tumbled off the bed, their hospital gown discarded on the floor, and their wings and tail too large for the small room. They tried to stand up, and hit the heart monitor, the foredrop and the table with their tail. As they turned in confusion, they hit the doctor, sending him through the open door and into the hallway. They turned to apologize and the nurse had to duck to avoid getting hit. They shook off the last fuzz, and the noise in the room became more apparent. They did not like it, so they ran out of the room, feeling the strength of their legs as they ran. Toothless was getting lost, but Hiccup noted the stairway, and they ran towards that and upwards towards the roof. They surely left more chaos in their wake, but right now they needed to feel the fresh air. Feel the wind. To fly. They finally made it all the way up to the top, and let the winds caress their skin. The smell of the ocean and freedom in their nose. They stood looking over the edge ready to fly when Hiccup felt it and Toothless hesitated. In their shifted state, Toothless still had all of his four legs. Now his tail felt off. Confused, they turned to look at it. Their left tail fin was missing. Hiccup gasped in confusion and fright, but Toothless was oddly calm. Rather than crying and panicking, the dragon shifted, swinging the tail around, trying out its balance. There was something familiar about it now. It felt lighter in a way. The thin scar running over the rift was old and well healed, like it had been there for years, and not just recently been ripped off. The dragon seemed older suddenly, more at ease and naturally. Hiccup had not realized the weight before it was gone. It could only mean one thing. This was Toothless' natural form. He was not meant to have two tail fins for some reason. Flashes of fin design flashed through Hiccup's mind again, layering over the tail as old memories. It made him wonder just how old Toothless actually was. If this was the dragon's natural state, then Hiccup would have to make up the difference and make a new tail so the dragon could fly again. Toothless purred. When Stoic caught up to them, Hiccup sat fully human on the edge of the roof, wrapped up in a bed sheet he had snatched from the clothing hanger. Behind him more nurses with tranquilizer guns stood at the ready to shoot a primal dragon. Toothless only huffed. Stoic bent down and picked up his son in his arms, carrying him downstairs to his room. Did I do the right thing? You did. His father shifted in his chair, smoothing his son's hair. I am very proud of you for standing up for yourself. Hiccup sighed deeper into his pillows. Toothless, a restless hum in his head. Even if I just want to carry on as normal. As a terrible terror. You can be whatever you want to be. Stoic's large hand settled on Hiccup's shoulder. That dragon of yours is something special. Hiccup could not help to smile. Stoic went to grab his cup and sat down in his own seat again. He swirled his lukewarm coffee around, after briefly dismissing something on his phone. I never heard of someone taking so long to present, but you were almost immediately able to bond and fly. You were leaps faster than all your friends. He took a sip, then grimaced. Yeah, it is. Strange. Toothless purred. The doctor man seemed to have a theory or two. Hiccup remembered the thin-looking man with the needle. Toothless snorts. They keep mentioning something about Alpha. Toothless seemed to swell in Hiccup's chest. Never heard the term before. Maybe ask Gobber. You know how he is with his theories. Hiccup wrinkled his nose. How is he? Better. Stoic looked at his phone for now. Leaving them in awkward silence. Gobber had also volunteered to help out, when he found out Stoic did. He went to join his friend. But he did not handle it as well as Stoic, and was captured by the Queen very fast. Hiccup had not known, and had not looked for his uncle. A pang of guilt now nagging him, telling him if he knew he could have helped. No matter how hard Gobber tried to reassure him otherwise. It had been chaotic and crazy at the nest. Hiccup had done the best he could. Now Gobber was suffering the consequences with the rest of the controlled shifters. It mostly included a lot of paperwork, but Gobber's one leg had problems shifting back. He had not made a full shift in years, and the forced shift from the Queen was problematic. He was back home in his workshop now, but not up to full working speed yet. It would come, he had promised Hiccup, when he came to visit last. Hiccup blew the hair out from his eyes. He can keep his theories for now, I am not in a hurry. His first wrinkled the sheets. It's not like I am going anywhere. They both looked towards the stub. Anger and pain flashed in Hiccup's chest. Toothless hummed soothing, cooing at him, but Hiccup still grabbed the front of his slip, trying to breathe, even as the panic rose and tried to choke him. His fingers dug into the bed sheet and his clothes, the tips turning black. A large engulfing arm went around him, pulling him close into a hug. The familiar smell of beard oil and soap was calming. Stoic stroked his hair and held him close, as Hiccup tried to calm his panic attack. It's gonna be okay. It's going to be okay. He soothed, calm and firm. Hiccup's voice choked on his own sobs, and he buried his face into his father's embrace, as the tears ran down his cheek, and he cried. So you just gonna carry on as normal? Pretty much, Hiccup nodded. Hiccup. Astrid scolded. Hiccup smiled a crooked grin at her. They had finally let him have visitors, and his friends stopped by, whenever it was possible. Even when their parents insisted, they still went to school as normal. They brought him homework he ignored, and gossip and anecdotes about life without him. Out of all of them, Astrid visited the most. She would do her homework next to his bed, or they would watch bad movies on her tablet. He always looked forward to her visits the most. She did not push for him to get better, or come back as some of the others did. She had his back. Even now when she punched his arm, a little too hard. Hiccup raised his hands in defense. What? I realized my fear for the unknown torture they would put me under is stupid. But I will still not let them do it. I also have people who can help me. I am not alone, ha. Besides, I saved Burke. They owe me, they can do. Astrid's mouth opened at his sudden silence. He leaned back in his bed groaning loudly, hiding his face in his hands. What? She tried a small smile. Hiccup's hand went into his hair, and the tips of his fingers turned black. I just freaking saved Burke. I saved Burke. How crazy am I? She was enormous. How am I not dead? He panted. There it was. Astrid patted his arm lightly. Yeah. I have been wondering about that myself. He tilted her head. Good thing seeing a therapist is part of your recovery program, huh? They both stared down at the covered stub. Yeah. Good. Hiccup grumbled, irritated. He sighed, and leaned further back in his pillows again. Astrid looked at him with pity, but also something else. Hiccup felt his nerves set on fire, when she took his hand in both on hers. He slowly turned his head to look at her. She slowly stroked his hand, eyes focused on the task. But her cheeks were dusted pink, and blue scales were crawling up her neck. We're gonna be okay, she assured him. She looked him in the eyes and then kissed his hand, making Hiccup simultaneously combust in his bed, while Toothless cackled over his behavior. Astrid just smiled. So how long are you on crutches for? Rough Nut asked from her spot on the floor next to her brother. Tough Nut was on his phone not really paying attention, with Astrid and Fish Legs cross-legged next to them, doing homework. Snotlout leaned against the mirror wall in the rehabilitation center, watching Hiccup hobble back and forth on the metal walkway, trying to slowly build up some strength in his remaining leg. He looked ready to jump the moment Hiccup wobbled. Well, Hiccup grunted and took another jump forward/step, hands gripping the rails white-knuckled. They did the cast of my stump, so now I am just waiting for them to make the leg, so I can try it on and adjust it, but I will properly not do without the crutches for some time. Also since I am growing. Snotlout snorted, and Hiccup ignored him. I'm gonna go through a lot more legs, and that's gonna be expensive, so we also gonna look at how much I can lean on the crutches so I don't need a new leg every other week. Or a leg that can extend as I grow. I am debating with the doctors. Tough and Fish Legs both huffed out a chuckle. On the other hand, the government did promise me, they would cover all my expensive treatment. So I am also thinking about milking that as much as possible. You know, since I undermined authority and risked a high-hazard military exercise. They could just say I saved their butt. That we saved their butt. He groaned and the weight on his leg made it wobble. Snotlout jumped up to help him sit down. Good thing they cover therapy as well as physical therapy. Astrid noted. How is it going? The group looked at Hiccup, a bit awkwardly in the silence. Okay, I think. My dad joins sometimes. It helps. Hiccup settled on. We even talk about Mom sometimes, it's weird. Fish Legs looked knowingly at the twins, and they all remained silent. Then the physical therapist entered, and scolded them all for being here, distracting Hiccup from his work. They all scampered to flee, except Snotlout, who was the designated driver. The clinic had tried to throw them all out on several occasions, but Hiccup's pack always had an ability to enter anyway. I am back! Shouted Astrid from the doorway, discarding her light jacket, fanning her face from the heat with a notepad. Hiccup shouted, acknowledging her from his spot on the couch in the living room. His new leg was propped up next to the sofa, and he was casually not glaring at it from time to time. Instead he was very invested in his computer on his lap, where he laid down almost upside down. Why is your leg in a timeout? Astrid asked when she entered. We are having a disagreement, Hiccup huffed, annoyed, and Toothless backed him up. Okay. Move over. Astrid pushed him, and Hiccup begrudgingly made room next to him. She led it in over him, disregarding his private sphere. She was doing that a lot recently. Hiccup could not say he minded. What are you working on? Nothing interesting. Hiccup closed the top of the PC with the designs of a potential new leg he had been tinkering with. What up with you, General? Keeping the others line. Toothless chucked, satisfaction blooming his Hiccup's chest. Stormfly eeped, equally pleased. Astrid snorted and punched Hiccup in the shoulder. Ever since the twins found out that the government had called Hiccup an alpha, they started teasing him and calling him their almighty leader and master, and since Astrid was in charge hierarchical whenever Hiccup was not around, they started calling her General. Rough Nut tried to see if she could use her water cannon to cool us down. But she is only able to make scalding hot water, so it kinda went the opposite of what she wanted to. Hiccup raised an eyebrow. Don't worry, I handled it. We are not completely useless without you, you know. I know. Not when they have you. Astrid beamed, pink dusting her face. Come on, let's go to the kitchen. I can show you what horrors I brought you. Oh goody. Astrid stood and waited for Hiccup to join her. He was stuck glaring at his legs in timeout. A green tinge was starting to bleed into his eyes. Astrid looked between them. Should I get your crutch? Defeated, Hiccup nodded, and Astrid went to fetch it. Come on. They sat down in the kitchen. Astrid spread out their homework and sat up her own tablet. She reached over expectantly and Hiccup handed her his PC without a word. The routine was normal and practiced. They basically did not have to talk anymore, reading each other like a second language. Astrid smirked at him, that could only mean bad things for Hiccup. Mildew thought that you should not miss the surprise exam he threw. He gave me orders to time you precisely. Lucky you. Lucky me. Hiccup pulled out his chair and put down his crutch. He was getting better with the leg, but it still felt wrong sometimes. And if he made a few adjustments, without his doctors knowing, that was his own business. He sat down, and pulled his chair closer to Astrid's. She smiled and pulled him even closer, so they could look over her notes, their thighs touching. He was back at school half-time now, and the rest at home resting. Most of his teachers were fine with it, but Mildew saw this as Hiccup trying to slack off. Apparently losing a limb was not a valid reason to miss school, and he had been giving Hiccup extra assignments to keep him sharp. Hiccup was pretty sure Mildew just hated him and was missing opportunities to pick at him. What the school had been told was that Hiccup had had an accident at home alone, while Stoic was out, helping with the feral dragon. So now more knew him as being not only clumsy, but also a real danger to his own well-being. Very tragic. Stoic and some of the other adults on the island had taken the credit for taking down the dragon. Toothless was very salty about this. He was pouting for a week when he found out. Personally, Hiccup thought this was better. It's done, yes, but seeing all the interviews, broadcasts, and other stuff his father had to participate in, made him glad it was not him. The mainland was celebrating the bear shifter that Hiccup had encountered, and Burke was celebrating Stoic. The two of them made sure to keep the public eye on them, and off the bunch of random teenagers that had turned up at the nest. Best solution for everybody. Even if his sour dragon did not think so. He was mostly quiet now. He usually was when Astrid was around. He was not really interested in their human things, only coming out to greet Stormfly. Sometimes the two dragons would have separate conversations humming at each other, while their human was busy with their own conversation. Astrid may be Hiccup's fake general, but Stormfly took her responsibility as Toothless second-in-command very seriously. Hiccup scratched the tip of his nose with his pen, trying to figure out the correct answer. Astrid reached over. "Here, let me." She leaned close, letting their sides touch, as she used his pen to write down a hint. "Like this." Hiccup leaned into her side, and took back his pen. "Like this." He scribbled his answer. "Close, but look here." Astrid took back the pen. Warmth spread from Hiccup's fingertips where she had touched him, and spread pleasantly through his body. His eyes were locked on her face, studying the details. Every freckle, to the hilt of her nose, and the shape of her pink mouth. Astrid's eyes found his, and her cheeks heated up. But she straightened and tapped his nose with the pen. "Focus, please." He chuckled, but under the table her hand found his, and interlaced their fingers. The first day Hiccup walked on his own with his new prosthetic, it was like he was being born anew. He felt balanced, in a way that he did not know he had been unbalanced before. Like his dragon. "So how are you gonna fly?" Fizzlegs asked, when Hiccup was showing off the leg to his friends. They sat around their usual table, asking questions and admiring the new limb that had received more than just some minor adjustments. Nothing fancy or high-tech. Just a leg that made Hiccup able to feel normal again. "I have some ideas," Hiccup told him, remembering the flashes of a fin Toothless had shown him. "I'm thinking maybe some Bluetooth connected, maybe a sensor on the other fin, to register the movement, and mimic them. The real trick is I need something that will hold the shift." He looked expectantly at his friend. Fishlegs beamed. "Maybe you can help me out with that." "I would like that." They ran through the forest together. Astrid's hand was grasped tight in his as they sprinted. They scurried around the trees, hiding from the warm sun, sticking to the shades. "Where are we going?" Astrid asked. "You'll see." Hiccup only pulled harder at her hand. They skid around a boulder and down a narrow path leading into a narrow cliff path. The whole time Hiccup did not let go of her hand. Toothless leaped in his throat. Astrid's fingers gave his hand a gentle squeeze and Hiccup could not help to smile. Astrid made a kind of giggle noise, but Hiccup was too excited to tease her for it. It felt wonderful to run again. Even with the prosthetic, being able to move freely was a blessing. He had gotten used to the sensation now. Accepted it as a part of him. Even if it sometimes hurt so much he could not look at it. But it was what he had needed, what his dragon had needed unfortunately. He had not known just how out of balance he was before, because Toothless was. The path grew stepper and narrower, and his prosthetic slipped, making him almost take a tumble had it not been for Astrid, keeping them both up. He yelled out as Astrid pulled them back, and they slid down the last stretch of the path. Toothless chuckled deep in Hiccup's chest, judging. They end up colliding into the rock wall of the entryway into the cove. Astrid's breath tickled him in the ear, and he hastily tried to salvage the situation. "Sorry. Here, let me." "No, it's okay." They both turned, and ended awkwardly stuck chest to chest, nose to nose. Hiccup tried not to look down at Astrid's chest, which was pressed up against him. They were the same height now, maybe he was getting a little taller. But her blue eyes are staring him down, and not in the same glaring way they used to. Awkwardly Hiccup chuckled and wedged himself out from under her. "This way." Astrid was unusually silent, as he reached over and took her hand again. They entered the cove, the sunlight flittering down on them. The cove. Really? Astrid teased, even if Hiccup was not sure why. "How fitting." She mumbled under her breath. Hiccup smiled at her. "Hey, over here, slowpokes." Astrid tensed with the outburst, but Hiccup lit up. "You're here?" "Who is here?" Astrid hissed. Hiccup pulled her with them as they joined their pack. "Great, you're all here," Astrid said, voice strange and cracking. "Why? Why would we not?" Roughnut smirked. "The great and mighty Night Fury has summoned us, so we must obey," she sang dramatically. Toothless preened. Hiccup let go of Astrid's hand to fling Roughnut's braid in her face, making her laugh. "Drop it," he warned her with a soft growl, only making her spiky grin wider. "I want to show you something." Hiccup slipped out of his shoes and coat. Even his hoodie went. He put down his phone, wallet and keys on top of the neatly folded hoodie. "I bet you will." Roughnut bit her lip, and Astrid hit her shoulder. Hiccup ignored them and rolled his shoulder, feeling out the libs. "Wanna know a secret?" Snotlout snorted, but Firelegs picked up, with Toughnut looking expectantly at him. "Ready?" he asked his dragon as much as his friends. "Just get on with it." Snotlout moaned. It came easy. The feel of the stretch, and his body moved and shifted, muscles shifting and rearranging, scales sprouting and talons elongating. They landed heavily on their front legs, using one of their feet to scratch behind their newly formed ear, which was still twitching slightly. They shake off the last of the change, their scales settling in. With a grin they turned to their audience, spreading out their wings. Fishlegs dropped his phone. "Now, that is not fair," howled Snotlout. "How are you doing that? It almost killed you last time." How are you doing that? How are you keeping it?" Their pack's eyes are wide and their mouths open in disbelief and awe. Toothless swelled with pride, Hiccup shook his head. They whooshed around their tail, shocking them. Fishlegs stumbled up first to have a look at the fin. Hiccup's prosthetic was warped and almost unrecognizable. But it survived most of the shift. It was still not a completely full-functioning tail fin, but a skeleton for one. They planned on using their growth spurt to their advantage and try as many prototypes as possible so they would fly again. Fishlegs gushed in awe, spouting nonsense about patterns, PBC boards, statistics and other numbers. Snotlout had his hands in his hair, walking around them with more annoyance than adoration, but it was still a win. The twins ran around excitedly, pointing at different parts of them. Only Astrid remained in her spot. Her eyes were locked on them, following every movement. Stormfly flashed in her eyes, showing her she was not alone. Hiccup melted a little bit. Toothless chuckled at his silliness. They walked towards her and let the shift melt away, leaving behind the gangly boy. "You did it," she whispered. "I did." "How?" "It is easy." Astrid huffed, but Hiccup only laughed. "Yeah, right. No, really, that is why we are out here." He looked towards others. "I am gonna teach you. I have been practicing with my dad. The moment I have a flying prototype, we are going flying, but I have been getting pretty good at shifting." The others looked to each other in turn, a hopeful but careful tension spreading. "And now it is your turn." Hiccup stepped into Astrid's space, his fingertips finding the right spots on her neck and behind her ears. Astrid made a sound deep in her throat. Behind them Rough Nut hit Tough, but else they were just watching the two of them. Astrid's breath was getting faster and more rapid, the scales flaring up, her nostrils growing a bit bigger. It's okay, it's okay. Hiccup said to Strongfly, reaching out to her. Toothless settled in him, breathing with him. They took a deep breath, and made the other dragon breathe with them. Feel her, listen to her, Hiccup said. They both closed their eyes, their foreheads resting against each other, breathing in tandem. Can you feel her? Astrid's eyes twitched, but she did not open her eyes. Feel her breath, her heart, her legs, her wings. Her tail, her spikes, every bit of scale. Toothless hummed. Feel her strength, feel her will. I feel her. They opened their eyes and looked into each at hers. Hiccup's were flashing green, his pupils square, while Astrid's was glaring yellow. Hiccup, I feel her. Astrid's breath was hiking in excitement. Good. Relax, find her again. He moved his hands, so they were on her shoulders. Do you trust her? I do. Listen to her. Toothless hissed softly. What does she say? Say. Feel then. They barked gently. Like, she loves me. Astrid hiccuped, with a grin. They nodded at her. She is your strength. Your breath, your heart. Your body. You are one. You are equal. Astrid took a deep breath, closing her eyes again. Hiccup found her hand and placed it against her own heart. He breathed with her, just like his father had with him. His large hand on his shoulder and heart. Feel her. I feel her. Now, let go. Hiccup let go of her, taking a step back. Around him his pack was holding their breath. Nothing was happening. Hiccup started doubting. Toothless tilted their head in similar confusion briefly. Maybe they did something wrong. Maybe they did not explain it fully. Suddenly Toothless silenced him, intent on Astrid. The twins twitched, clearly disappointed. But then Astrid opened her eyes, and melted away. The twins shrieked and jumped back as the dragon spread her wings, and shook her spiked-crowned head. The tail whooshed over the ground, making tracks where the deadly spikes slewed up the earth. She swung it around, sending a strike of spikes into a nearby tree, making her friends duck for cover. Stormfly took her first steps as Fully shifted and shrieked in pure joy. Her roar was shrill and bird-like but unmistakably happy. Hiccup just managed to get to a standing position, before he had to gain balance again as he suddenly had his arms full of dragon. She preened and purred, as she rubbed her large head and snout against Hiccup's body, almost lifting him off his feet. She was so much larger than when half shifted. Even larger than Toothless. Hiccup threw his arms around the excited dragon, petting her. She squawked happily at him, then left him to test out her wings. Hiccup and his friends cheered as she took off and took a lap around the lake. Byt the end the shift was failing a bit, scales flickering, but nothing dangerous. They landed near them, her shift disappeared, and Astrid tumbled into Hiccup's arms. She hugs him tight. I did it did it. I shifted. She screamed at him. You did, you did. He cheered, lifting her up in the hug and swinging her around. You guys did it. Toothless roared his approval. They are interrupted by their friends. My turn, my turn. How did you do it? Hiccup put Astrid down and went to grab Fishleg's arm, trying to explain more in detail so he understood. He took turns trying to help the other shift, but they did not have it as easy as Astrid did. In the end only Snotlout managed to shift that afternoon, making him unbearable for the next 2 weeks. But by the end of the month, they were all shifted. All flying together. Notes. Have you seen what I did? We are not done yet with the story. I still have a little bit left. Please hang on, winking smiley. Chapter 28, What Comes Next? Summary. Life will continue. Some things the same, some not. Notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. Chapter text. Valka gasped and dropped her phone. The screen shattered across the middle, flickering a bit, but not going black. Trembling, she picked it up, and flicked a stray piece of glass off the screen. The top corner had gone dark, with bleeding edges, but still her eyes were fixed to the photo attached in the mail her husband had sent. In the photo her husband was half-shifted, standing tall and proud, with a larger smile on his face than Valka had seen in a decade. His wings were spread out, and his green and red tail lay folded at his feet. Scales and claws on full display as he gave the camera a thumb up and the other arm around their son. Their son. Hiccup was taller than she remembered. Still much smaller than Stoic, but larger to compensate for the large big black wings that stretched far and wide behind his back, even larger than his father. His large black tail, also wrapped around his feet. One black tail fin, and one large deep red with a white Viking crest on. Valka was not sure what that was about. Her son's eyes shone bright green, and his teeth were a little bit larger than normal. His ears were large and rounded in big ear flaps, and scales ran up his cheek, around his eyes and down his neck. Under his chin were small knobs of some fringe. He had his arms around his father, to two of them leaning on each other looking happy and silly, like they had been playing when the picture was taken. Hiccup gave the camera a wave. Black scales, and large black claws. Night Fury, it said under the picture. Valka had honed in on the words, but the rest of the words had become fussy and unreadable in her mind. Cloudjumper was agitated and was making it hard to focus on the small screen. What killed her, and hurt the most, was the sight of her son's foot. The lack thereof. His leg right under his left knee was gone. No prosthetic leg, but Valka knew it was only a matter of time. Her son. A Night Fury. An alpha species reincarnated. The implications, the discovery. She barely had the mind to read the rest of the mail, had it not been for her own dragon poking her. She tried to be happy for her son. He had finally claimed his dragon partner. He was not alone. Still, the thought of so much happening, that Hiccup had fought a beast, and lost his legs in the process. It was too much to bear. And Valka had not been there for any of it. Did she even have a place between those two anymore? Could she ever return home again? Hiccup looked at Astrid. She had been quiet all day, and she did not do quiet. Toothless tittered. "Were you disappointed?" Hiccup said, breaking the silence. "No, no, not at all." She hissed through gritted teeth, still trying to sound cheery and normal after yesterday. "You thought it was just gonna be the two of us in the cove." Hiccup scratched his cheek. Astrid still shook her head in denial, and flung her backpack on Hiccup's bed. "No, no, no problem." Her giggle was fake and shrill. "We are all friends here," she hummed. She started to unpack her books and pencil case from her backpack. Hiccup stayed in the doorway. His heart was pounding his chest. Toothless gave an encouraging murmur, and Hiccup took the last step inside. "Astrid, can we talk?" She hummed nonchalantly, not really listening. Hiccup opened his mouth, before his courage left him. "I want to know how you feel about me." Astrid stopped what she was doing, her head turning slowly to look at him. "Because for me you're the best. You're Astrid, and I always looked up to you, even before." He rambled, his hands going all over the place. "Now I know I can rely on you and Stormfly. You're like a Toothless general or something," his second. "Like they are not attracted to each other, but I am kind of attracted to you so." Anyway, he managed to take in air, even as he kept talking. His face felt flushed, and his eyes kept darting over his room, to anywhere but her. "But for me you will always be NR1. She was stepping closer to him, her hands on her hips, with her typical Astrid glare. Oh no, had he been reading everything wrong? Toothless only hummed at him. "And I am not talking about dragon compatibility, because you know, but I just think you are great. But I can't help wondering if you're only here because of Toothless and his weird attraction powers, or if you're actually here for me." She was so close now, glaring at him down. Hiccup wanted to sink into the ground, had it not been for the steady press of his dragon keeping him upright. "That's all I was gonna say." Astrid scoffed at him. Actually scoffed. Well, there went his confidence. So much for pouring his heart out. "You know, for a smart guy, you're so clueless," she said. Then her face turned softer and she smiled at him, sending butterflies directly into his stomach. I am not gonna deny that there is something going on with our dragons. Even if we are not sure what it is. She flicked her braid behind her shoulder. Stormfly is very devoted to your dragon, and I am not sure how or why. It is very confusing. But. She poked him in the chest. That is not why I keep hanging out without. I liked you before we started presenting. Her face turned a tad pink with the confession. And I know I handled it badly when we were younger, and I am trying to be better now. I should not have left you behind. I know that now, but, she shrugged. You are clever, and funny, and annoying and smart and. You make me wanna be better too. So, yeah. Hiccup was quite starstruck with the confession. So. Astrid echoed. I like you, and you like me, and our dragons get along. It was like he was looking at all the pieces, but they would not connect in his mind. It was too busy screaming at him, that Astrid had called him smart. Astrid reached over, and grabbed hold of his face. They stared intensely into each other's eyes. Hiccup felt a warmth spreading through his body, heating up his face, and somewhere deep in his belly. Just checking. This is not a dragon thing, right? No, it is not. Astrid agreed. Good, because. He did not get to finish his thought, as Astrid surged forwards and pressed her mouth against his. Hiccup world exploded in color. The sound drowning out around, making him only focus on the girl kissing him. He stepped closer, his hands finding her waist. She felt it, and pulled him deeper into the kiss, prying his lips open, swiping her tongue tentatively. Then she gently pulled back to look at him. Her eyes were bleeding yellow, and there were scales on her face and neck, with spikes poking through her hair. She traced her taloned finger against his cheek. Ha! Hiccup felt his own scales under her touch. Then the dragons disappeared, like they went back to sleep, leaving them alone for a time. So just checking. Our dragons. His breath was coming out in puffs. Totally platonic. Astrid agreed, her breath and voice, not better than him. Us. Hiccup gesture between them. She shook her head, a sly grin on her lips. I don't think so. Oh, thank the gods. Hiccup wrapped an arm firmly around her and pulled her into a much deeper, firmer and more passionate kiss. She flung her arms around his neck, opening her mouth, grinning against his lips. He looked down at the well-worn, well-loved hoodie. It was frayed at the hands and at the zipper. He knew that was a hole in the inner pocket and the back icon was now unreadable from wash. He patted the hoodie, and then put it down into the drawer and closed it. Astrid called from downstairs, and Hiccup yelled his reply. He grabbed his new natural leather jacket from his chair, leaving it turning from the force. He shrugged the jacket on, feeling the smooth interlining, ran across his skin when he pulled it on. The layer felt more natural, and Hiccup knew that he would have no problem with shifting with this on. Wow! Astrid gushed. She pulled her bangs out of her eyes. You look nice. You think so? It's kinda different. He grinned. The dark leather jacket was muddy brown, almost black with 2 red stripes around his right arms. It looked nice on top of his scarlet red t-shirt. Yeah, but good different. She swiped invisible dust off his shoulders, taking a chance to feel them up. It suits you. He grinned and leaned in to kiss her cheek before heading outside. He waved to his dad and Gobber sitting in the kitchen. They yelled their goodbyes at the two of them in return. He pushed the door open, where his friend was waiting. Snotlout half hanging out the window, honking the horn, with fish legs, and the twins packed into their own car. They yelled their greeting and then went back to fighting. Hiccup slid into his seat next to Snot. Cool threads. Snot remarked, then turned on the engine, and turned up the music on his phone connected to the speaker. Hiccup leaned back and took in his friends. They were sitting outside enjoying the sun, before they had to rush inside to the next class. While Hiccup was a solitude creature, best suited by himself, enjoying the calm in the nice and quiet, his dragon was different. Toothless took comfort in the presence of others, and basked in admiration and respect from his fellow dragons. You're a prideful little fellow. Toothless shook himself contently with just a hint of a satisfied smirk. Hiccup could not help to smirk too. Astrid moved beside him, catching his eyes. What? She tilted her head at him. With a hum he reached out his hand and brushed her bangs out of her vision to get a better view of her eyes. He could feel her quiver slightly by the touch, and he knew she would never have let him do this, if the others weren't so busy with the twins' fight. He quickly removed his hand again, before she could say something. He did feel her slight intake of breath. He grinned and looked away from her, feeling her haunting eyes bore into the back of his head. "What's that?" he called, making everyone in their group turn to look. At the same time he gripped Astrid's wrist, making her look at him. She barely gave her a moment's notice before he kissed her. She blinked, dazzled at him, and a little bit flustered as he retreated, turning to the others as they complained. "I can't see anything." Tuff was the loudest. His sister flicked his cap off his head. Fishleg dipped behind his phone, snickering. "Ha! Maybe it was just a trick of the light." Hiccup shrugged. "My bad." He sounded sincere, but he sent Astrid a knowing look that made her smile, before she yelled back at Tough Nut. Snotlout pushed back, coming to Tough Nut's defense. In retaliation he threw a football at Astrid's head. Hiccup managed to duck, his back hitting the grass. Astrid grabbed it, and punctured it with a spiky claw. Snotlout guffawed, while the rest laughed at him. When Hiccup sat up again, Astrid had left him to chase after Snotlout, who had produced a new football. Rough Nut took her place, and Hiccup handed her the comic he had been reading. She settled in next to him, her other hand reaching over to Fish Legs. They intertwined their fingers seamlessly, Fish not even looking up from his phone. Hiccup sat back on his elbows, looking towards the sky. The sun's heat felt great on his face, and he could feel Toothless hummed appreciatively. He took a deep breath, taking in his surroundings. He could hear other groups around him going about their lunch break. A group of Nadders and Grockles were play fighting further back, with their friends cheering them on. A group of girls walked past them, one of them showing of her scales. Most of all he sensed his friends. Their smells, their noise and the feel of their dragon's presence. Toothless hums in his chest, filled him up, making him feel loved and not alone. Surrounded by people he trusted and loved. His friends. His dragon. His pack. This felt like home. The end.